All right. Good morning, colleagues. Today is January 25, our first land use committee meeting of the new year. I want to welcome my colleagues, Vice Chair. Oh, no, actually, I have a new Vice Chair. That's right. Vice Chair Laura Dominguez. Welcome. Yeah, we do match. Very good. Good taste. And my colleague, Commissioner Richardson. And I believe on Zoom, we have Commissioner Fernandez. Anybody else?
Yeah, PJ, if you could move Commissioner Fernandez over to a panelist because he wanted to participate for the first item.
All right. Good morning, Commissioner. I believe we're going to take your item first, Commissioner Fernandez, which is item number 1. Can we confirm he's on? Can I hear your lovely voice, Commissioner Fernandez?
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, colleagues.
Good morning. Okay, I'll tee this up. This is your item. This is potential LDR amendments to commercial district regulations in North Beach in order to limit the proliferation of nuisance uses. Commissioner Fernandez, do you want to explain this?
And Mr. Chair, Commissioner Fernandez, before you start, I just wanted to make a couple of quick announcements because we have some late deferrals.
Okay.
Item number 4 regarding the overlay regulations for Century Lane and Ferry Lane is being deferred to the February 15th Land Use Committee meeting. Item number 7 pertaining to the CD3 zoning regulations on convenience stores on Lincoln Road is being deferred to the March 1st, 2023 meeting. And item number 10 regarding apartment hotels, item number 11 regarding certificates of appropriateness, and item number 12 regarding chapter 46. All 3 of those are being deferred to the February 15th, 2023 meeting.
Okay, that's great. Colleagues, any other items wishing to defer or withdraw? Okay, well, I think we just save ourselves some time. Okay, great. Commissioner Fernandez, would you like to go?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, thank you. You could probably explain this so much better than what I could because you've been a champion of this type of legislation before I got elected. But you know, the intent of this legislation is to limit the proliferation of establishments, which may negatively affect surrounding areas of North Beach, where we want to protect the quality of life of our residents, protect public safety, and protect the character of the area. We've seen in other parts of the city how certain uses dominate block after block of commercial districts. You'll go into certain parts of our city and you used to see tobacco and vape dealers, check cashing stores, pawn shops, souvenirs, and t-shirt shops and tattoo parlors just dominate block after block. You would go one block, you would see that same mix. The next block was again the repeat, again the tobacco dealers, the check cashing stores, the souvenir shops, the t-shirt shops, and it limited the diversity of the retail experience, and it limited the opportunity for local businesses to get established there. So we want to create the opportunity for there to be unique cultural, retail, and dining experiences in this part of our city. We want to promote its revitalization and its vitality, and that's what this legislation does. It looks at the CD1, CD2, TC1, TC2, TC3, TCC, ARM 2 and ARM 3 districts, and we establish in them prohibited uses that are mainly those type of nuisance uses that I just described, the tobacco and vape dealers, the packaged liquor stores, the check cashing stores, the fortune readers, the tattoo studios, convenience stores, and these types of stores. The one thing I also want to clarify for the record, people were writing on social media that this would target the cultural little bodegas that we see around North Beach. And I just want for clarification, if the planning director could indicate whether or not this legislation in any way would affect current or future bodegas from opening up in North Beach.
It does not. Bodegas are considered a grocery store, and a grocery store is a separately defined use under our code. Grocery stores are currently not prohibited anywhere in North Beach, and there is no intention to prohibit grocery stores as part of this ordinance. It's not included under the list of prohibited uses as part of this draft ordinance.
And Mr. Planning Director, and this would cover areas north of 63rd Street, correct?
That's correct.
And I mentioned that because there are parts of North Beach that already have some of these restrictions. I guess we could call them. Creating this would create parity, and by creating parity in these areas north of 63rd Street, I just would like for the city attorney to confirm this is create a more legally defensible policy in our code of ordinances.
I think anytime that we adopt use restrictions like this, I think applying it to an area that has common characteristics, applying it broadly, I think is a good idea and lends itself to a more defensible ordinance.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Attorney. And with that, Mr. Chair, I thank you for allowing me to present my item. My apologies for not being there in person, but I wanted to make sure that I was here to present it because it is an important policy for North Beach.
Wonderful. Okay, colleagues? Anybody on the line?
No, there's no hands up on Zoom.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. Can you define the area, Tom? And also, I noticed package stores are on here, so it begs a question. We have recently had a situation on Alton Road where someone wanted to relocate across the street, right? And I guess because of the restriction that was passed, they could not do that. So would that also prohibit, if there's a liquor store now and they wanted to move across the street, would they be allowed to do that, or would this limit that?
No, it wouldn't. The ordinance, to your first question, Commissioner, would apply to basically all of the commercial districts north of 63rd Street, as well as the medium and high intensity residential districts, which do allow accessory uses to either a hotel or an apartment. If you have a use that's existing within that area and this ordinance moves forward, that use would become legal nonconforming. So if a package store became legal nonconforming, it would not be able to expand or relocate. It could remain in its current location, but it couldn't locate next door or across the street.
Is there a way that we can accomplish this, but also provide that flexibility that if somebody wanted to relocate, because, I can see a situation where someone may get a better deal, it also leaves the landlord where they're in a great deal of power, right? Because if they know that a business cannot relocate, they can just keep increasing the rents because they know the lessee in that case has no option but to pay it or go out of business. So is there any flexibility where we could provide that option?
Under the current regulations, package stores are not prohibited outright north of 63rd Street. However, citywide, we do have a minimum distance separation requirement of 1,500 feet between all package stores. And so that in and of itself has done a good job of controlling these types of uses. If we remove package stores, for instance, from the list of prohibited uses, any new package store would be subject to the 1,500 foot distance separation requirement, as would an existing one. So if an existing package store happened to be located within 1,500 feet and was legal nonconforming, under the current code, they wouldn't be able to relocate. Whether or not we could add some provisions to allowing package stores to move or relocate, I think we'd probably have to take a closer look at that with the city attorney. It could present some challenges. Nick, I don't know if you have anything to add with regard to that.
My only suggestion would be if the committee were looking to maybe limit the number, rather than have them go away by attrition, would be to look at something like a minimum distance separation. I know for package stores we already have them, but for some of these other uses, we probably don't. So I think a distance separation allows some flexibility for if one business closes or wants
Nick,
to relocate.
Could you, just thinking out loud, place a cap on the number of package stores in the area? And then if, as long as that cap is not being exceeded, that could potentially allow an existing package store to relocate.
We could do that. We've done that with the MIMO, the Art Deco MIMO overlay. So I think we could do that.
Because that's something else we could look at, Commissioner, is identify all the existing package stores, place a cap. And so that way, if somebody did want to relocate, they could do that. If somebody went out of business, then a new slot would open up. Somebody else could potentially take that slot.
So let me ask the sponsor, Commissioner Fernandez. With the other four, I really don't think we need to provide any other flexibility. But with package stores, what do you think about if somebody wants to relocate across the street? Or what I want to try to do is avoid the situation we had on Alton Road, which gave the landlord a lot of power that they could just raise the rent because the lessee has no option. Do you have any flexibility on this category?
I'm open to considering it. I want to understand better, and perhaps the city attorney, if he could just repeat again what it is that we have in the MIMO overlay in the South Beach MIMO overlay. So we would establish a cap just to make sure that new ones couldn't open, but existing ones, that they needed to move within a certain radius, that they could.
What we have in the Art Deco MIMO overlay is we identify a number of uses that are subject either to a prohibition on certain corridors. For instance, on Ocean Drive, there are certain uses that are prohibited outright, like formula uses, formula retail and restaurant. We have other uses where we have a minimum distance separation or a cap on the number in that entire district. The specifics I would defer to Tom on for each use, but that's something we could do here if the committee were interested in exploring, let's say, a cap of 5 of package stores north of 63rd Street, and then that would limit the total number.
Okay. Well, I'm curious to see what my colleagues want to do, and I want to be supportive of this, but I do want to find a way to have flexibility with that one area.
And that's and Mr. Chair, I just want to say it is forward thinking, and I want to thank my colleague for that suggestion, because we're looking for a solution to something that we've already seen to be a problem, and so we don't want to make the same mistake again. And it's smart to address this now. And the last thing that I would like is for this policy to create a situation that now we're making rent more expensive for a small locally owned business, that we're limiting the business so much that now the landlord has this great power over them, and so I want to be mindful of that unintended consequence. I'd be very interested to hear as well what my colleagues have to say on this proposal.
Okay, so I read through this as well, and like Alex mentioned, I saw on social media people were very concerned about the bodega, so it's good to hear that that has nothing to do with a bodega. And so to recap, what we're seeing here is the LDR amendment would be for any new ones. Existing stores would stay put, with the exception potentially of a package store moving would be able to reopen in a new location.
Correct. This is prospective, so anybody who is legally established would be allowed to continue their use.
Mm-hmm. And how many check cashing stores are there now?
That I don't know. We would need to get back to you with regard to the actual number of these types of existing uses.
Because there are different pockets in North Beach with people that may need check cashing. And if there's only one and that one closes, what are the people going to do? I just want to make sure that there's more than one, that they have opportunity. That's it for me.
Question for council. Could we have, as part of our legislation, just, some sort of, notwithstanding the foregoing, blah, 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 if a business that, currently, exists as of the date of legislation chooses to relocate in the district, that would be allowed? I mean, is that a way to just cover this?
I think that that we My only concern is then is we're not really prohibiting the use. Generally, when we prohibit a particular use, existing operators become legal non-conforming, and the idea is that they go away by attrition.
Right.
So I think that if we wanted to allow flexibility, I would recommend instead looking at a cap on the total
cap,
number
okay.
or distance separation.
Yeah, because I was thinking that because some of these, I think, at least I would want to see just sunset. Look, once they close, it can't reopen. You know, others, particularly, you know, a liquor store. We don't want more of them, but doesn't mean we don't want any of them.
Right.
So maybe you address that through a cap.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah. Go ahead,
I
Commissioner. Davis.
I agree with what you are saying. And I'll tell you why. My goal here is to make sure that what happened, for example, and I'll be very blunt, what happened on Washington Avenue doesn't happen again in this part of the city, that you had block after block being defined by this very limited type of retail. And so by establishing a cap, and perhaps when the policy comes back, hopefully to the city commission, maybe the administration could come with a recommendation on what the cap should be. But with a cap, we could still achieve that same outcome. Because if we establish a cap, it's going to be impossible that every single block now you can have the same formula of check catching store, liquor store, tattoo parlor, fortune teller. You know, that's what we want to avoid, and that's what I want to avoid. I want there to be diversity in retail experiences, and you know, better quality cultural offerings and restaurants and that type of stuff that drive pedestrianism and positive energy into the area. And so by establishing a cap, I think it is a reasonable proposal that you all as my colleagues have proposed, and I welcome that. And I would just ask the administration to determine what that cap should be and come forward with a recommendation for it when it makes its way back to the city commission.
So, what about, I see these other categories like convenience stores. Is it also, it would also limit the number, there would be no more convenience stores?
Correct.
And pharmacies as well?
Correct. The list is very long and the list is summarized on page 2 of the memo, because as the committee may recall, when this was discussed last time, we had come up with a number of different potential types of prohibited uses. So the administration came up with a very lengthy use. Some of these, the committee may decide that rather than prohibiting them outright and not allowing any more new ones, that perhaps a cap should be considered, so that there could be some, but as Commissioner Fernandez pointed out, you won't see one on every single block.
Right. So what about if, because I think, you know, especially around that Normandy, there are a lot of empty storefronts right now, and I don't know how many convenience stores are in that area. I also, you know, some of these things that get defined as convenience stores are also pharmacies like the CVS and the Walgreens. Some of these things, as the chair said, if they were to go out of business, I would be happy to see them sunset and to not have a replacement. Nick, is there a way that we could limit the number of some of these, and then also within that say that anyone who has a current license would have the option to relocate first, so that, you see, I want to make sure that if somebody has a liquor store and the landlord wants to raise the rent so much that they can't afford it, that they could move across the street if that's the way they need to save their business, right? And so I don't want to have like a cap and then have, I guess, somebody else, a new one, come in, and then the existing one, I guess their existing business would still count as one. And so if they were just relocating, it wouldn't increase the quantity. So I'd be interested in looking at that. To the sponsor, I don't know, what is your desire, Commissioner Fernandez? Do you want to try to get this back to the commission, or do you want to leave this here another month so we can kind of work out these details, or what would you like to do?
This was a dual referral.
Yeah.
So it's already been referred to the planning board. So once the land use committee makes its recommendation, we can take that ordinance directly to the planning board.
So it hasn't, they're waiting for us to,
Correct.
okay. So Commissioner Fernandez, do you think we could keep this here and have legal work on it for the next month and then try to finalize it and see what we're going to do before we send it to the planning board?
Yeah, that's fine. I think it will be helpful when we do that and when we establish these caps. And I would like for the administration to come forward at the next meeting with their recommendation on the caps, as well from the city attorney with any other policy amendment that they may feel may be necessary with it. But to see on a map, and maybe I'm not sure I think it's finance who handles the BTRs, to be able to see on a map, okay, where are the, as Commissioner Dominguez mentioned, the check cashing stores, and how many do we have, so that we see how many there actually are in the area. And if we limited, like, what would be the right number to make sure that, okay, that the service is still provided, but not overpopulating that area. And the same thing with, as you mentioned, like the liquor store, or let's say like a pharmacy, because I understand the need for the use. So it'd be great to be able to see on a map, dotted on a map, how many we have, and together with a recommendation from the administration on capping it, how many they would suggest capping, and an amended version of the ordinance at the next meeting.
Yeah, I would think that the administration could give us a recommendation on which ones we should have a quantity on, and which ones we should just let sunset if they go out of business. And also, in addition to the quantity, I would think that we would want to look at a distance separator requirement as well. So that's kind of what I'd like to see if my colleagues agree. I'd leave it here until the 23rd of February and work on it some more. Sounds like the sponsor's okay with that.
Just for clarification purposes, we didn't list pharmacy as a prohibited use because pharmacies are regulated pursuant to the Controlled Substances Ordinance. So there's only very certain districts that a pharmacy can go into, and they also have strict distance separation regulations. So that's why we didn't include pharmacy. But I think that from what I understand, you want us to explore which of these uses might be better suited to have a cap on the number of uses and a potential distance separation, as opposed to an outright prohibition. I think some of the uses discussed today in that regard include package store and check cashing store. We would map those uses, and then we would come up with what we think would be a good cap for that. I think that because of the work that's involved in that, we'd suggest this being continued to the March 1st meeting, so that we have enough time to put that together. The next meeting is just under 3 weeks away, so I don't know if we could get it done in time for that meeting, but we could definitely have it for March 1st.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
What I would like to do is give just a little bit more clarity to the administration as they engage in this work. On perhaps we could provide some feedback on which are the uses that we certainly wouldn't even, that we would just want to make a prohibited use without any cap. Because like for me, like for example, tobacco and vape dealers, I feel comfortable saying, I just, want to sunset these. I just, I don't want to create a cap for these. I just want to make sure that we put them as a prohibited use. Or pawn shops, I know for sure, or tattoo studios, and or the fortune tellers, those are uses that I feel comfortable saying, don't bring me a cap on that, because I just want to straight out make it a prohibited use. Even some of these souvenir and t-shirt stores, I feel comfortable, saying I want to make that prohibited use just because of the way they've just proliferated in certain areas. And I just wonder if perhaps a committee would be inclined to provide the administration with some of that feedback.
I agree with you on those points. I don't think those are controversial, at least for me.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree with that as well. The ones that you identified, Commissioner Fernandez, I'm totally supportive of that. I think the ones that I think you've heard us express some concern or the check cashing, because you just want to make sure that that service is available. Especially we have some neighborhoods there where that service is probably needed, the package stores. I think we should look at the convenience store, the pharmacy. I don't know, with medical cannabis right now, I know that there's a distance separator. Is there any limit on the number in North Beach right now?
It's true, it's limited by distance separation. And I believe the North Beach zone that permits medical cannabis establishments, they're at their max. They can only have 2 because of the distance separation. Pharmacy falls under the same set of regulations. And so any pharmacy stores that are outside the allowable zone are considered, and any that are within the zone would have to meet the distance separation requirements, or else they would also be considered legal nonconforming.
And Mr. Chairman, I would feel comfortable if the committee does as well, putting in their prohibited use, the vitamin stores. I don't want to cap on that. I just want to prohibit it completely, because usually vitamin stores, a true vitamin store, what you can find at a vitamin store, you can usually find at a pharmacy as well. And what's happening is that you have some of these CBD stores opening up under the category of vitamin store. And what we've seen is that some of these CBD stores end up getting closed down with their business tax receipt revoked after undercover investigations where they're found to be selling illegal substances. And so I feel comfortable, even vitamin stores, not asking for them to bring back the cap on that, because I feel just should be prohibited.
I agree with that.
Yeah. I don't know, what the sort of economic or academic rationale is, but these stores all seem to cluster together. I was at the Hard Rock Casino a couple weeks ago to see a show, and if you've ever been outside that casino, it's not unlike any casino or dog track or anything like that. Like, all of the stores that are outside, they're literally check cashing stores, vape shops, massage parlors, cell phone repair shops, all of these nuisance business, and they all cluster together typically in 1-story strip malls. And I don't know if they all support each other, but it literally just cancels entire blocks of any kind of development. The other thing I saw out there were used car shops. I mean, people just literally, at their economic wits end, are relying on these stores just to survive. And it just brings blight, prevents true economic development. And I think we're well served by trying to prohibit and restrict these stores from proliferating in our city. Sadly, if you look at the MXC district, these things are all over the place, and I think, had we prohibited these things 20, 30 years ago, we might be talking about a different experience in the MXC. And I think for me, until that gets redeveloped and push these stores out, we're not going to be able to restore the MXC to its full glory. And I wish this legislation had existed a long time ago. For those of us who've been around long enough, in the early 90s, the MXC was a great shopping district, lots of great cafes, very high end. I mean, Versace famously built his own home there, right? And over time, other things happened, and these stores got a foothold, and it's really hard to encourage someone to open, a multi-million-dollar restaurant or store when they're next to a tattoo parlor, massage parlor, check cashing store, because it just brings a crowd that, scares away that kind of investment. So thank you, Commissioner Fernandez, for spearheading this, and hopefully we'll continue trying to chip away at this problem. Please.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you taking this up, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, colleagues, for your help and work on this.
So Vice Chair Dominguez raised a good question, and I had that in the back of my mind, but why don't you go ahead and ask the question?
You just mentioned massage parlors, but I quickly glanced at the list and I didn't see it on there. Is that something that can be added if the sponsor is
Sure.
amenable?
We could add massage studios, massage clinics. We have a definition for those. I don't know if they're called massage parlors, but yeah, whatever that definition, we can add that.
So, I mean, let's be frank, and I don't think we have a police department here, but, to me, And there's definitely evidence of this in our own city. But a lot of these stores are nothing more than fronts for nefarious uses, drug dealing, prostitution, other, criminal elements. The reason I didn't speak up on the massage parlors is, how do you address like a high-end spa that it provides, a lot of different services? But I think if we have, some definition that's been thought out, I mean, because, you see these massage parlors in the middle of nowhere, you're like, what's going on there. We've had it here in the city, we've had raids. So yeah, I think it's a smart move to include those.
Mr. Chairman, because I think you and Commissioner Dominguez are accurate in this. But I do also agree it has to be carefully defined, definition of massage parlor. Because, like, for example, one of our city's tenants in the building right next to City Hall is Massage Envy. So how do you deal with the establishment as a front for prostitution versus the establishment that is legitimate, a massage establishment that would be a great commercial tenant, as Commissioner Richardson was mentioning, around an area like the Fountain, where it would fit in just perfectly. A place like Massage Envy or some other legitimate massage establishment. And perhaps what we could do, because I wouldn't want to hold back this legislation, perhaps what we could do, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Dominguez, we could work together on a separate piece of legislation that we could add on always that definition to this, so that's well thought out, carefully vetted definition that addresses the issue without limiting good commercial from going into the area. If you're open to that, I'm happy to co-sponsor that with you guys, and even Commissioner Richardson if he likes.
Yeah, colleagues.
Yeah, let me ask a related question that Commissioner Fernandez's comment just prompts with me, and that is, what happens if we have a new hotel? As this area develops, I'm expecting there'll be more commercial development of a beautiful new hotel that is more luxury and wants to have a spa and offer massages as part of their hotel offering. Would it be prohibited if we did? Yeah.
The definition that we created, and let me find it, was created to distinguish between like an Elemis Spa, Fontainebleau Spa, Canyon Ranch Spa, a legitimate hotel spa or a legitimate spa, from the front for illicit activities, and so let me see exactly what it says so that we can make sure that whatever regulation that we use, it says massage therapy center. That's what we call it. It means an establishment that offers, sells, or provides manipulations of the tissues, human body, hand, foot, elbow, et cetera, so that's, I believe, specific to a center that engages solely in that, whereas a spa offers a lot more in terms of treatment, and that's what we've used to distinguish. Unfortunately, this would be consistent with a place like Massage Envy. So they're legitimate, but it's, I think, to the sponsor's point, how do you distinguish between the legitimate massage therapy center like Massage Envy versus the illegitimate one? And perhaps
and that's
we can fine tune that.
And through the chair, and perhaps that's where, like, with time we can all work on that separate definition through a separate ordinance, because Commissioner Richardson, you're absolutely right. Maybe in the definition we need to make an exception for massage therapy establishments that are within the footprint or the envelope of a hotel, or within the envelope of a clinic. Sometimes doctors' offices or chiropractor may have a massage therapist part of their practice. You wouldn't want to perhaps limit that, and so by carefully crafting the definition, we could perhaps avoid that unintended consequence of pushing out something that may not be bad and may contribute well to the area. So thank you for catching that and bringing that up. I think we can certainly work that into a separate definition that we could work on.
You got it?
Yep.
Okay, great. Commissioner Fernandez, how much longer do we have you?
I think I'm done for the day, Mr. Chairman.
Well, if I can indulge you, you have one more item here, which is item number 8. If you have the time, maybe we can take it up, just the
Which item
Baywalk.
is that one, Mr. Chair?
The Baywalk, expediting the opening of the Baywalk and move the reopening of the Baywalk up to the GeoBond prioritization list and present the
Sure.
Baywalk and to this committee.
Sure. And I recognize David Martinez to provide us an update on that if it's okay with you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, come on up. He's already here.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. This item is a recurring item, just basically providing a status of our Baywalk completion throughout. As represented in the memorandum and the attached exhibit, I tend to characterize 4 types of projects in the Baywalk for completion. One of them would be the general obligation bond funded. There's 3 segments that are being developed as a singular project. And we're working on those. Those are the South Bay Club condo, the Bay Garden Manor condominium, and the Bayview Terrace condominium. That one is in its very early stages. We've met with we have a consultant on board that's putting together possibilities and concepts of what these overwater baywalks could look like. We've met with the property owners, and it's in the early development stages. The next step would be to come to terms with the property owners in terms of what it could look like, and then work on either modifying some of the current agreements that exist with 2 of them and creating a new one for Bay Garden Manor that does not have an agreement. And then we will move forward with pre-design permitting, which I know you're all aware takes a decent amount of time. So those are probably the ones that are furthest out. I estimate that we wouldn't be ready for any kind of procurement on those until probably late 2024. And those are the latest, the ones that are furthest out. The next category that I bring up is also a general obligation bond funded, and this is the pedestrian bridge that you're all very familiar with. We're in the final stages, or we meaning the developer who's actually has the design team. We have 90% documents. The city is performing the required DOT peer review of the structural documents. Then all these documents eventually get submitted formally through FDOT for their permitting. And then based on FDOT permitting and the city's permitting, the developer is projecting that they might be able to start construction as early as June, but certainly this summer on the pedestrian bridge.
Mr.
The
Chair,
next one,
if I may, and just a quick question, because there's things that are in our control, things that are out of our control, and what the county does with public transportation is kind of out of our control. And I just have an inquiry: what happens with the pedestrian bridge if, let's say, Miami-Dade County moves forward with its plan to extend the Metro Mover into Miami Beach and into 5th Street? Now we have a pedestrian bridge that's elevated over the entrance of the city, and the Metro Mover is an elevated mode of transportation. Have we looked into what happens with that?
Commissioner, that's a great point. And yes, we have. That's a simple answer. We have coordinated. The design has been carefully coordinated with Miami-Dade County in terms of providing an envelope or an area where if that moves forward, there is a means of interjecting an over aerial Metro Mover or other type of monorail system through there. So yes, the answer is yes. It has been coordinated with Miami-Dade County as part of the development of the design.
Thank you.
I'll try to wrap it up. The next one category that I have is the overwater Baywalk that goes through the back of the Mondrian and Mirador condominiums between the 1000 and 1200 block of Lincoln Road of West Avenue. This is one that's, as well as the pedestrian bridge, is tied to the developers agreement as part of the 500 Alton development. This is one where the developer is required to construct it as part of the deal. The deal that the city had was the city helps them secure the permitting, which we have. So right now, my understanding is the developer is working with a contractor to try to commence and come up with a deal to begin the construction shortly. So we will be updating you all on that. So hopefully that within the next 12 months, we would have those 3 blocks completed, and that would be a connection at 10th Street. And the last one is the Lincoln Bay Tower piece that connects to Lincoln Road street end. And this is part of the West Avenue Phase 2 scope of work. Now that the project is back on now over the last few months and we're moving forward, that is now progressing. We already have approvals from the property owner and signatures so that we can proceed with that. The West Avenue Phase 2 project is projected to be completed in its entirety by 2025. So what that means is this Bay Walk should be completed, obviously, within that time frame. And that's what I got.
Perfect.
Come on. Commissioner Friend, are you satisfied with that presentation?
Yeah, I just asked for CIP to continue working on this and getting some of this participation from these condos, especially the ones with a little bit more resistance. And if they could just come back to us, give us another update in about 2 or 3 months, it'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you all. Joseph Magazine, 650 West Avenue. Thank you very much to everybody, both elected officials and city staff, for the focus on the Baywalk. I think it's absolutely critical, not just for that West Avenue neighborhood, but our city as a whole. Following up on Commissioner Fernandez's point about the monorail or possibly rail transit, I actually posed that exact question to Commissioner Higgins in one of her county town hall meetings that she's just had within the past couple of days. I said, no matter what that feature could look like, whether it be the monorail that looks like it's been shelved, or the connecting transit that would be the Bay Link or whatever it may be termed, she assured us that they have been working with FDOT, and any iteration of that transit coming over the MacArthur is already incorporating the overpass, the 5th Street overpasses. I think that's highly critical to this. And then also, if I could just make one polite suggestion, similar to what we did with Monad Terrace, where we required any new development along West Avenue to essentially privately fund their Baywalk, and I believe that they have done so. There's a lot of different permitting items that are going on. For instance, one of the areas that remains closed, even though the Baywalk is constructed, is behind South Point or South Gate Towers, I believe. That has just changed hands to Aimco, a very big national REIT. So I think we should re-engage them, ask them to open up, and I believe that they are going through the permitting process to open a new restaurant there. So perhaps any type of new permitting for the buildings along West Avenue could somehow be tied to the private focus on the Baywalk projects. So thank you all for your time and attention. Just wanted to bring those things to light.
Mr. Chairman, I see one caller online.
Okay.
Alfredo Gonzalez.
Good morning, Alfredo. Alfredo, you're on.
Alfredo, can you unmute yourself?
I apologize. My hand was up by accident. Good morning and happy New Year.
Good morning. Okay. All right. Great job, David.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, moving right
Mr.
along.
Chairman, I think Joseph Magazine brought up a good point, and I think whether it be with Aimco or any of these other companies that own buildings along the Baywalk, if they're coming in asking the city for any special type of permit, and they're not cooperating with us with the opening of the Baywalk, which is something that our residents and the neighbors of that area should have the right to. We should be using that leverage to get them to open that Baywalk. It's ultimately, waterfront property, and we should be using that avenue. And so I don't know if through the city attorney, if we have any true legal mechanism through which to do that, but I'd like for us to explore that, because at the end of the day, they need our approval. for like a restaurant, for example, as Joseph mentioned, then they should be collaborating, actively working with us and opening up this important public asset. And I'm not sure if Nick, if you have any input on that.
To support that amount of money if they would agree in exchange to open it, rather than have it conditioned on this other event. So I'd like to look at that if you want to do that. I think definitely
Okay,
we might be able to accept.
On the Baywalk item, Mr. Chair, the sponsor would like the next update to be in 3 months, so we'll place this on the May 10th Land Use Committee.
I mean,
agenda for
look,
the next
when
update.
you think about it, it is public property. But right now it's exclusively enjoyed by the residents of those apartments. And, they came up with this, fiction that, there will be loitering behind the apartments. On the contrary, the people who live on West Avenue, as well as other residents throughout the city, can enjoy that access to the beautiful bay that right now is being exclusively enjoyed by the tenants of those apartments.
Yeah.
And that was, political pressure put on us by the then owner of the property. That's the fact. Okay, we'll move on. Colleagues, let's do item number 5. So I think we have some folks here waiting on that item, and this is to discuss the property at 7605 Collins Avenue. The mayor is sponsoring this. Who's going to present?
I can present for the administration, Mr. Chair. This item came before the Land Use Committee on November 18th, and it was referred as a general discussion item regarding the parcel at 7605 Collins Avenue. And this is a parcel that is kind of an anomaly because it's part of the Altos Del Mar Historic District and is zoned single family. But on this particular block, the 7600 block of the east side of Collins Avenue, it's the lone private property and the lone single family home. So we had presented some different potential options, and the committee directed the administration to come up with a potential overlay for the area so that this property could have some additional flexibility with regard to uses, given its unique situation. The property owner is represented by counsel, and I believe they have a brief presentation. But there are two versions of the LDR amendment that are included in the package. And the framework for the overlay is identical. The only difference is that the administration version is a little bit more limited in terms of the types of accessory uses and additional uses that would be allowed. And the property owner is proposing a few more uses, and they'll go into detail on that. But on the administration version, we suggested that in addition to single-family home usage, that townhomes be permitted, bed and breakfast inn be permitted, personal service be permitted, office use be permitted, a restaurant or a cafe, but the establishment not being open later than 11 p.m. Sunday through Thursday and midnight on Friday and Saturdays, with no entertainment and a maximum of 60 seats, and that uses that serve alcohol be limited to cafes and restaurants. And then finally, retail would be permitted, but only as an accessory use to a restaurant, cafe, or personal service, and not occupying more than 10% of the interior of the main use. If there is consensus on either version or a variation of either version of the proposed overlay, the next step would be for the Land Use Committee to endorse a proposal and send it back to the commission for a referral to the Planning Board.
So thank you, Tom. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Richardson, Commissioner Dominguez. Michael Larkin, 200 South Biscayne Boulevard here representing Rudy and Betsy Perez. They are basically looking for an exit strategy. If you know the property, you know how isolated it is. And as it is right now, it's not that marketable. So they're looking for a way to make it more marketable, which is, of course, the way you do that in the land development regulations, that you increase the variety of uses that can occur within the property. If it's just restricted to single family and it's hard as a single family home when you're so isolated, then the answer is, well, let's increase the number of uses. So if you look at this zoning map excerpt, it kind of shows you everything. It shows you it's surrounded by GU zoning, but that means a park to the north, the library site to the south of the parking lot, and then CD2 zoning along Harding Avenue. To the north of that, you have beginning of Altos Del Mar, split between RS4, RS3, and then to the west, you have some RM1 zoning. Tom is right that there are two versions, but 90% they're about the same. If you all turn to the second page in your handout, that's a comparison chart. So no need to dwell upon what we agree upon. But for instance, city administration is saying apartments should not be permitted. I do understand it's a little bit hard to carve up this historic home, but we think that there could be some opportunity to have apartments within this home. Retail in the city administration's version is only permitted as an accessory use, limited to 10% of the overall square footage. I remember in Sunset Harbor, before Fresh Market was here, there was a Thomas Meyer that occupied that, basically a home that's at the corner of Bay. And it was successful there for a long time before, of course, it was demolished to make way for Fresh Market. So I do believe there's room to have a retail use occupy the entirety of the structure. Staff is supportive of restaurant and cafe with limitations. We would like to have a compromise position there. We understand the need for limitations, and I'll get to that at the end. The one big issue that staff is saying should not be permitted is hotels and suite hotels. We believe there is an opportunity to have a nice, smaller boutique hotel here right next to the ocean. We think it'd be a very popular use. We don't want to be put into the definition of bed and breakfast where maybe one of the units have to be lived in by an innkeeper, let's call it. We'd rather have it be like a pure hotel or suite hotel use. Toward the bottom of the chart, staff had recommended two other uses that we had not thought of and we're in favor of, which is personal service. It could be a full service spa, not a massage parlor, or it could be acupuncturist, could be anything that like that. An office would be a very good use here too, and we're in favor of that. With regard to the restaurant use, if you turn to our last page of the handout, where it's a compromise position, we're just saying we like closing time 7 days a week of midnight. Staff is saying 60 seats, so that's the minimum you need to sell alcohol under the code. We think we'd like to be a little bit higher, and if we exceed 125, then we go to the planning board for conditional use permit. Entertainment not permitted. We think there is some room for some ambient style entertainment music, as you all have permitted in Collins Park. It could be a DJ playing background music or pianist or things like that. So we believe there is some style of entertainment music that should be permitted here. With that, I'd just like to have Betsy Perez come up and give you all a few remarks about her motivation. One of my favorite clients, one of my oldest clients, just in terms of year span, not of course age.
Well, thank you
Yeah.
for saying that. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. Laura, it's so good to see you up there representing us women. I'm so happy that you're here. So, Michael, as much as I love you, you mentioned in the beginning that Rudy and I are looking for an exit strategy. We're not looking for an exit strategy. We're not going anywhere. One day when we do sell our home, we want to stay here. We love this community. We've raised our 5 kids in this community, and we want to make sure that everything that we do with our property is in the best interest of this community. But we noticed when we purchased our property, over almost 23 years ago, the city evolved, North Beach has evolved, and we too must evolve. And I feel like this is the best way. And I'm looking at the chart and I've discussed it with council and I trust our city and I trust you guys. And I know you guys always do what's in the best interest of our city, but there's a couple of things that I do agree with my council that should be permitted. I don't understand why you would have a townhome, but not allow apartments. I understand a bed and breakfast, but not allow hotels. Living there and experiencing the community, I think that a beautiful boutique hotel one day would be amazing. The Bandshell's right down the street, and that's experiencing some amazing events, and hotels are sold out when those events happen. And I think that a boutique hotel is needed. It's funny that I love the way that you're all looking out for North Beach and Commissioner Fernandez about the uses and massage parlors. The other night, it was last night, actually, I came home from an event at the Botanical Garden. It was an orchid event, and it was almost 9 p.m. at night, and there was a massage parlor open. And I thought, what the heck is that doing open at 9 o'clock at night, right down the street from my house? We want to elevate our community. We don't want to bring it down. So I respect the fact that you want to keep uses in North Beach to help our community. And I think that once you work with me on this, we can do that. Thank you very much.
So that's all we have, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners.
Okay. Colleagues. So Tom, what we're looking here is to move forward on a potential overlay.
Correct. We drafted, there's 2 versions of the overlay. And whichever one or variation of one the committee endorses, we can bring back to the commission for a referral to the planning board. Because it does require an LDR amendment as well as a comprehensive plan amendment.
Okay.
Colleagues, quick questions. So a couple of questions. What is the current height restriction on the particular parcel?
It's zoned RS4. I believe it's 28 feet for a flat roof structure. No, I'm sorry, 24 feet for a flat roof structure and 28 feet for a pitch roof. And I need to correct one misstatement. This is actually part of the Harding Town site, local historic district, not the Altos Del Mar. So they're not subject to the Altos Del Mar single family regulations.
So would any of these changes change the height?
No, these deal strictly with the use of the property.
Okay, because that's where I would have a greater concern, given that literally you've got an island that's surrounded by GU, right? Have you done an appraisal on the property? I know that when last year and a half, we looked at the property where the post office was, and we were told that those 2 parcels were worth less than 10 million, which kind of surprised me.
I don't know the answer to that. Have you done? You want to address?
I have not done a specific appraisal. I've had offers on my property, and they were significantly, more than that. That's why I was surprised when you worked on the library lots. but I haven't done an appraisal now.
Yeah, because I know that, I think one of our colleagues brought an item as a possibility of the city purchasing the lot as well. So I'm not opposed to the zoning changes as long as there's not a height increase. Because I wouldn't want to see some tall spire right in the middle of a park. So, and I have flexibility on, some of these uses. Maybe some of our colleagues at the full commission may have other thoughts as well, but my only concern would be a height. And if you're saying there's no height increase, then I'm not opposed to this at all.
Right.
So my first thought is thinking to get an appraisal, and in reading the memo, it says that making these changes would make the property more marketable. Has it been on the market yet? I would guess not if you haven't gotten an appraisal. And I like the idea of the city potentially purchasing that lot. That sounds very interesting. But of the different versions, I'd lean towards what the administration put forth.
So do we have a motion to move it?
So
forward?
I'll make the motion in concert with Commissioner Dominguez that we move it back to the commission with the version that the city administration, and then put the question to the full commission to see what version they would like to do, and confirming that there's no height increase. And then I don't know I don't know if it's part of this, or as you mentioned, Commissioner Dominguez, about getting an appraisal. Were you suggesting maybe the city get appraisal and look at that?
Well, the property owner is the one bringing this forward, so they should get their own appraisal, I think.
Well, I think if we were to look at it, we'd want
we're gonna look at purchasing.
we would want an independent appraisal, right? So Eric wants to say something. Is that okay?
Yeah, through the chair. I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that we actually did a dual referral on this. We're talking about the LDR and comp plan amendments here at land use today. And then we have a discussion of finance on Friday about the concept of whether or not the city would be interested in the parcel. We have not done an appraisal at this point in time, but we'll have that discussion on Friday to see whether or not that needs to be referred back to the full commission.
And through the chair, I'm sorry.
No, please.
I just want to direct one question at the maker of the motion. Is it possible just to amend the city's version to include hotels? Because I think that's a really valuable use here, to have a boutique hotel option. And I don't see the harm in it being a nuisance. I understand about the restaurant limitations. Restaurants can easily evolve into nuisances, but a hotel, I don't think there's a harm in having a suite hotel or a hotel at this location.
Keep it as is, the way the city had recommended it, and if our full commission would want to do an amendment.
Yeah, I would say, Mr. Larkin, you know us all, so, make the rounds before the commission and tell us why the hotel. I personally wouldn't be opposed to that as long as there's not a height increase.
Okay, so this will be February 22nd.
Yeah, I believe that is the maker of the motion, Commissioner Richardson, seconded by Commissioner Dominguez. Okay.
That's fine.
And what we're going to do is send this to the commission. It probably would make sense to send this as an R9 so that the commission can discuss both options, because you'd like both the property owner's version as well as the administration version to be presented to the commission. But your recommendation as a committee is the administration version.
Yeah, and I'm just that's what we're moving back to the commission and let the commission discuss it. I'm just putting on the record that I personally am not opposed to the hotel or suite hotel being added. And I would assume, Mr. Larkin, you're going to make the rounds and talk to people and convince people that that's okay to do. Some of these other things I'm not as comfortable with, but I'm okay with that as long as there's no height increase. Now, if you come back later and say you want a height increase, that'll disappoint me.
Understood.
Right? Because I don't think it's going to be appropriate to have some spire. It's a very small footprint, right?
I won't do it, but to give you further comfort, we're staying within the single family regulations and the unit area here is 0.5. So you take 0.5, you multiply by the square footage of the property and you don't come up with much.
Right.
So it would be silly to have a tall pencil
agree.
thin doesn't work here.
I agree.
So
And then we'll have the other conversation on Friday in finance.
yes, that'll be illuminating as well. And I'll try my darndest to expand the scope, even have to go against Mr. Mooney and his tough demeanor. I will still try to expand the scope of uses. Thank you all for your time.
And yes, our plan would be to place this on the February 22nd CC agenda.
Great. Okay. Thank you all so much. Appreciate it.
Very good. All right. Few to go. Commissioner Minor's not here, but item number 9, we can defer that unless colleagues, you want to take that up. Is someone here to present that?
I can certainly give the committee an update on that item, and I don't know if there's anybody that wanted to speak on this item that's on Zoom.
I do see one hand up on, two hands up on Zoom. Mark Needle.
So, Mr. Chair, I don't know if you recall that when we discussed this previously, we asked the administration to have a public hearing because I didn't feel like there was enough public comment on this. And so there was, and so at a minimum, I would just like the administration to give us an update on that meeting. It's my understanding it took place. I had a conflict and I wasn't able to attend, but I'd like to hear that. And then what other public comments?
Sure. So this item was last discussed by the committee at the September 28th, 2022 Land Use Committee meeting. And the committee directed the administration to hold an on-site community meeting within the Flamingo Park area. And on December 19th of last year, 2022, the city held an evening public meeting at the Miami Beach Police Department community room. And it was a hybrid meeting that was advertised, and it was actually fairly well attended by both residents and property owners. The city provided a very brief presentation regarding the outline of the proposed 6th Street overlay. And after a brief presentation, some residents expressed concerns regarding the potential proliferation of transient and commercial uses along the south side of 6th Street across from the Flamingo Park residential neighborhood. And some of the specific recommendations put forth by attendees of the meeting included prohibiting the introduction of balconies facing 6th Street or any side street for any transient uses, exploring the introduction of zoning incentives that would encourage residential development, and exploring the possibility of rezoning the south side of 6th Street to the RM1 zoning district. As noted in the memo, the administration is not recommending incorporating limits on balconies within new construction based solely upon a specific use. And we would also not recommend rezoning the area south of 6th Street. However, with regard to incentivizing residential development, one potential option to consider would be under a separate path to increase the maximum allowable FAR for residential uses in order to incentivize residential uses within that area. This has been done in other areas of the city to encourage the transition from existing legal non-conforming uses or other undesirable uses to long-term residential uses. And that might be something that might be worthwhile to explore within this particular area. However, an FAR increase would require approval from the voters, so it would require a separate ballot question. With that, the actual draft overlay ordinance that we had previously prepared and provided has remained unchanged. There's an administration version of the proposed overlay, and the Flamingo Park Neighborhood Association also has their own version of the overlay that's a little more restrictive than what the administration has recommended. This item, as we've indicated previously, was not a dual referral. So once it is moved out of this committee, it would have to go back to the full city commission for a potential referral to the planning board in order to implement any overlay as part of the LDR amendment.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. I know the administration has a version in Flamingo Park. Have we had input from the landowners, the people that own the property? Have they been weighing in and have they been part of the process?
Yes, we've had discussions with landowners. When this process first started almost a year ago, we had a meeting with a number of property owners. To date, none of the property owners that we have spoken to or met with are in favor of the overlay, and they would prefer that there not be any changes to the current regulations. There may be other property owners that have not come forward that may have an opinion as well, but the ones that we have talked to date have not been supportive of the overlay.
And when you talk about the potential FAR increase for housing, are we talking about workforce housing, or are you suggesting it could be any kind of housing? Because I wouldn't be supportive of, having an increase for luxury housing, if you will, but if we were doing affordable or workforce, I think there may be an opportunity. But what were you thinking?
We were thinking just residential, in order to incentivize residential over transient types of uses. However, depending upon how that policy may or may not evolve, that is certainly something that the commission could consider, limiting or at least requiring a certain amount of workforce and affordable housing. Perhaps it's a hybrid of both market rate housing and workforce affordable housing, since it involves potentially an increase in FAR.
How would we do that? Would that be to say that if we wanted to try to target workforce, we would set some benchmark that it has to be somehow tied a percentage of AMI or something like that?
We have a definition for what does constitute workforce and affordable housing in the code, and it is tied to AMI. I think that if there was going to be a potential proposal for an FAR increase that was placed on the ballot, it could be structured in a way that the increase in FAR must include a limited percentage or a minimum percentage of workforce and affordable housing. So you could use some of the FAR increase for market rate housing, but a minimum portion would have to be used for workforce and affordable housing.
And would the potential increase in FAR also come with an increase in height, or the height would stay the same?
That's not something we've looked at. Normally, you do want to explore increases in height. However, this particular district for residential uses does have an allowance for up to 75 feet in height. I think that depending upon what the actual FAR increase is, we probably should explore limited increases in height in order to be able to accommodate that additional intensity so that it doesn't become accommodated in squat buildings.
Yeah, and when you say residential versus transient, you're talking about not including hotels, is that right?
Yeah, it would be, the FAR bonus would be for residential only, no hotels, no short-term rentals.
Okay, and at the public hearing, did you get feedback from the public? I don't know how many people participated and gave comments. Was it a handful, or was it 50 people, 5 people, 10 people?
It wasn't 50 people. I think, as I recall, there was probably about 15 people in person, and there was a number of people on Zoom. I don't have the exact figure of the number of people on Zoom, though.
Okay. I don't know, colleagues, how we get. I mean, I really feel like there's an opportunity for us to do some overlay there and to do something. Right now, we've got Flamingo Park wants one thing, the administration's got another, the developers and the landowners have another idea. There seems to me there's a compromise, because I do think that that area is ready for an overlay. We just have to figure out how we're going to land on it and come up with something. And I like the idea of the incentives for workforce, or having incentives if it's a number of units as part of a larger group. Also, I think with the new fire station being there, there may be the block across from the fire station. There might be some certain types of businesses that would want to locate there, and other businesses might not want to be there. I'm not sure, you'd want to build a new apartment across the street, but who knows?
Mr. Chair, would you be open to us listening to Scott Needleman? I think he's on the line. He's the president of Flamingo Park Neighborhood Association.
Of course. Morning, Scott.
I have two hands up. I have Mark Needle. I don't see his hand up.
It's like the first one. Whoever's up. Well, hang on, we have somebody in person, so let's go with Jack first, and then we'll go to our callers. Okay. Good morning.
Thank you. Just a few comments. I think it's very important.
And name for the record, right?
Oh, yes.
We're
Jack
formal
Johnson.
here, yeah.
Jack Johnson, a resident of the Flamingo Park Neighborhood Association. I think it's important that before this proposal and this issue goes to the planning board, that the planning department should model for the information of the members of the planning board and of the city commission graphically what the difference in the proposed heights proposed by Flamingo Park Neighborhood Association and proposed by the planning department, what that difference is. Perhaps a diagram along the north-south axis that shows the properties along the north side of 6th Street as compared to the two proposals for the south side of 6th Street. That would give the planning board members and commissioners a better idea of exactly how each of those proposals will affect the Flamingo Park Historic District, which is the purpose of the proposed overlay, is to protect the existing neighborhood. As for the planning department's objection to height limits that would make it difficult to reach the FAR. FAR is a maximum. It's not a minimum. And it's not necessary that every development reach FAR. Also, with regard to the promotion of housing, I think promoting housing by increasing FAR is not necessary. Perhaps housing could be promoted by allowing the administration's proposed height limits for housing and keeping the neighborhood association's height limits for commercial purposes. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, our first caller online is Mark Needle.
Okay. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this. I want to point out that when we did some years ago, Flamingo Park proposed an Alton Road overlay, and one of the most useful things in getting that finalized, and it took some time, was to build the consensus on what the approach should be and the physical massing should be, as well as the use restrictions to protect the adjacent neighborhood. One of the most useful things was having the modeling showing the differences, so showing what could happen, because I think Commissioner Richardson hit it right on the head. We have at least three different visions. One is status quo. Let's keep building things which we've already shown to be a threat to the neighborhood. Two is the residents' vision, which I don't think we've been able to show graphically yet because it hasn't been modeled. And third is the administration's compromise, which attempts to bridge between the two, but the administration has noted that there are areas where some things could additionally be done, but they haven't. But there are complexities because it's a unique area. So it's a unique area that merits some visioning attention, and we would like to have some better tools in having this discussion. As it relates to workforce, let me just say that the Flamingo Park position is not to increase height or FAR in the area, but rather to use some flexibilities, increased flexibilities in the rules. That's what we had proposed to incentivize those uses. However, I think all of this should be brought forward. If there is to be any kind of discussion along the lines that you're pursuing, Commissioner, it needs to happen with consensus, with the neighborhood supporting it, as you know, because when neighborhoods are opposed, those kinds of things can't go forward. So what we're looking for is to build some consensus for the developers to recognize that and owners to recognize that some changes are needed because the status quo is producing results that would be a wall of highly intense and impactful development, or the back end of large developments that reach to Fifth Street. And if there are large developments, really that's where you need to have these stepping rules. So I do think that that we can address these issues without encroaching on anyone's FAR rights, but rather just by using a scalpel instead of a hatchet in order to fashion this policy. It's a small district, but an important one because our vision for Sixth Street is that it can really be a unique and special walkable place that bridges between neighborhood and commercial uses. And it can be a nice, a really positive experience on Sixth Street, not an afterthought or just a looming potential for impacts that are going to generate a lot of complaints and adverse impacts on the adjoining properties. Thanks very much.
Mark, are you still there? Did you drop off? Mark, you dropped off. Yeah, the question.
I'm here. I just was muted.
Sorry. Yeah, just a question because you mentioned, incentives for developers. What incentives are you thinking about there?
So what we've put in our version, you'll see some tentative efforts in this regard that we allow for greater flexibility where we're calling for some restriction or protection in the area most close to Sixth Street. We've allowed flexibilities for both smaller properties and for anything that's going to has a contributing building that can be preserved, and for workforce housing, because this area is adjacent to transit. Of course, many areas are adjacent to transit. So this is not like the only place in the city that can be targeted for workforce and affordable housing. But we definitely are open to discussions, and we would love to take our summary handout and the other materials and come around and visit with each of you. But we would really like to see some modeling to help make those conversations easier, because it is hard to vision when you don't see it in a visual way.
Yeah, I'm just curious I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I think we all need to talk about this. When you talk about flexibility, what specifically, are you talking about? Because, this commission, we're very constrained into, what things, we can work with, right? We're limited by FAR and height and density. Other cities don't have those limitations that we have. So, we do things like, minimize, fees, parking requirements, things like that. But that has, sort of limited use. So, I'd love to talk to you about what kind of ideas you all have that we haven't considered. Commissioner
No,
Richardson.
I had the same question. So when you say greater flexibility, I would love to sit down and really start exploring what that means, what sort of greater flexibility you all have in mind. Because, we've been talking about this for a while, and I do think there's a way for us to get to an endpoint and to consider the administration's recommendations, the Flamingo Park neighborhood. I literally live 2 blocks from there. It's very important to me as well. And then the landowners. And I believe there's a way that we can get there. Tom, what is the height of the new fire station that's coming in? Do you know? At its highest point?
40 feet, I think, maybe 35.
And what's the height on Fifth Street for a building facing Fifth Street?
It depends upon the use, but the maximum building height is 50 feet east of Lenox Avenue. But if you're doing residential or a hotel, you can go up to 75 feet.
And you could do the same thing on the on 6th Street?
Yes, that's for the entire CPS district between 6th Street and 4th Street.
But there's, other than the building at 5th and Alton, there's nothing that high now, right? I don't think.
No, there's a building that's under construction that the code was recently amended to accommodate an office at Michigan and the south side of 5th Street. That's going to be 75 feet. And then, but yeah, most of the other
6th in
buildings
Michigan?
no, it's on Michigan between 4th and 5th.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay, I've got some things I want to talk about, but let's take the next caller.
Sure. The next caller is Johan Moore.
Good morning, Johan.
Oh, good morning, commissioners. Pleasure to see you all here. I'm really very heartened by the direction that the conversation is taking about workforce housing and affordable housing. But I just want to speak in favor of massing studies, and for a very simple reason. The public generally does not understand FAR. I understand it somewhat when someone explains it to me, but I could not explain it to anyone else. I think massing studies are clear and would be a really useful tool for this desired public engagement, because then people can see in front of them, either virtually on a screen or as a physical model, what the maximum possible massing could look like. And it gives them a basis for determining that as compared to their experience of real life. So that's all I actually want to say. And I encourage this conversation to go forward. Thank you very much, commissioners.
If I could just have 1 minute, I attended this meeting, spoke extensively afterwards with Mr. Mooney, with Mr. Johnson, with Scott, and with Johan as well. I would just like to emphasize the importance of usages. And as Tom kind of elaborated on, the usages, the allowable height for different usages is the same for residential and hotel. And what we've seen time and time again across the city, whether it be in this area, Washington Avenue or Sunset Harbor, when that playing field is equal, developers will oftentimes choose the transient usage because it is more economically valuable to them. So we do have to adjust that playing field, adjust zoning to create the city that we want to see. And I believe in this area more than any other, that is a strong residential fabric of that neighborhood. And in terms of workforce and affordable housing, I couldn't be a bigger fan or advocate of going down that path. I will say in this area, that actually, even if you don't tie it to a specific definition of AMI, which I believe is 120% AMI for workforce housing, about 80% for affordable, because of the location, that'll actually be naturally occurring. I don't think it's an area where you will see $5 to $6 million condos. So even if it is market rate, even if it doesn't fit that textbook definition of workforce and affordable housing AMI, I think that will be somewhat naturally occurring. So again, thank you all for your time.
Okay.
Okay.
You know, I just want to sit here thinking about this. We have a couple items coming up that I'm sponsoring to talk about workforce housing and stuff, and this definitely related to that. You know, I was thinking this morning, you know, I think we all saw the announcement. The county's planning on extending the Metro Mover into Miami Beach over the MacArthur Causeway. I, for one, am excited about it. Have been for 20 plus years. Actually, having a bay link connecting Miami Beach to the mainland, and as our city collectively, throughout Dade County, but City of Miami and City of Miami Beach continue to evolve, the need is ever more urgent. City of Miami's, on steroids, what's happening there. And it just seems to have no end in terms of the economic development and all the things that are happening down there. The cultural assets, the Arts Center, the PAM, the Frost, now they're selling the Genting land to, a developer who I'm sure will, finally do something at the old Miami Herald site. So, more jobs are being created across the Bay, very exciting jobs. So I think the need for BayLink is more pressing than ever as we try to address traffic issues. But, there's more reason than ever to go over to the city of Miami, whether you're going to go see the Miami Heat, go to your job, go enjoy their nightlife, or any of the cultural assets that they have. Fifth Street is becoming ever more important to or will become ever more important to us. I think for a long time it's lacked a vision. It's always bothered me that, for a long time, as you came over the MacArthur Causeway into Fifth Street, the first thing you would see were adult bookshops, gas stations, fast food joints. This was the calling card of Miami Beach as you came into our fine city. All these types of establishments. Fortunately, that's slowly starting to change. We have now, I think, a really nice Target there. We obviously have a Publix and complex. We've got office buildings that are being built. We've got hotels that are being built. So I think a better calling card is starting to come to Miami Beach along Fifth Street. We'll have a pedestrian bridge, which I think is going to be really exciting. But I think we do have to start thinking about, this area. If BayLink does happen, we've got a potential to master plan so that we can tie in, our workforce into the BayLink. I think the Flamingo Park neighborhood can really explode now. I mean, it's already a desirable place to live, but even more so if people can truly be carless and just walk over to BayLink, hop on it, and in one ride without having to change modes of transportation, be at their job in downtown. So I think, we need to think about this overlay and anything else we might be doing in the area. What do we want to be there so that we can create something for future generations? So I just wanted to put that out there because, BayLink to me had been dead, but I think now the county's got an actual proposal that makes sense for riders. The need is going to be greater than ever as, jobs are coming more and more to the city of Miami. The old Miami Herald site, if that gets developed, it's 13 acres. I can envision, countless office buildings being built there. Making Miami Beach a very desirable place to live. And if you can hop on the BayLink and be at your job in literally 5 minutes, could be, an amazing place to live. So if we're going to be building housing, what's the appropriate type of housing we want to be building along that corridor? Anyway, I wanted to throw that out there. So as we look at this overlay, how does that fit into BayLink? One thing I'll say about 6th Street, parts of 6th Street, I don't think we have any anyone from law enforcement here, but there are parts of 6th Street that are blighted, that have a lot of calls for service because of whatever reason people congregate there to do criminal activity. It is a blighted part of this neighborhood, and I do think it's incumbent upon us to try to do something to remedy that.
I think that the building of the new fire station is going to go a long way in that regard, right? Because we'll then have uniformed people there, firemen, firewomen. And I think that's going to change it a lot. So, Tom, do we have any restrictions right now? Like we just spent a lot of time talking about North Beach and some uses there. Do we have any prohibited uses right now?
No, other than uses that might be prohibited within the CPS2 district from a larger standpoint.
Yeah.
There are some that are proposed as part of this overlay.
Right. And I'm very much supportive of having an overlay. I just think we have to find, we have to figure out what it's going to be. And we've been spending some time on this. So I think it's time that we get closer to an answer.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at contributing reasons, there's a lot of contributing reasons why that area of 6th Street is so crime infested. But it's an ecosystem, right? So you have gas stations here, you have transient people coming and going there. They want to buy drugs. The drug dealers are around the corner. They hang out. There's bodegas there. There's liquor stores there. There's laundromats, places for people just to hang out. And these are ecosystems that exist. And if you can break that up or throw a lot of police resources at it, you can address some of the criminal problems that we have.
I'm supportive of what the Flamingo Park Neighborhood Association had put together. And I think from the briefing and from reading, so is the administration in general of providing a meaningful buffer. But it looks like we need more consensus. What would be the next step to get there?
If I could just following up on the comments that I've heard just now from all three of you. FP&A has been working on this since 2021. And I think it's important that this process be moved along. And that's why I would request that today you refer this back to the full commission for referral to the planning board so that this process can be moved along. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we do still have 2 callers on Zoom.
Okay.
The first is Scott Needleman.
Okay. Good morning, Scott.
Good morning. I'll be quick. Just want to reiterate what's been said previously about the massing studies. This is the probably the only way that call it the 3 sides, that the current owners, the neighborhood association, and the staff can really visualize what's being proposed or what's being asked for. Only then, when we see that, can we have a better idea of what the possibilities are. The neighborhood association is more than willing to keep the dialogue going, to try to come to some sort of an agreement. When this process started, there were sort of two lines. One was limiting massing, the other was limiting uses. In all this dialogue, the neighborhood association did come to an agreement with the staff as far as uses are concerned. So, it's not a futile effort to keep the dialogue going, but it is important to see what's being proposed in terms of massing from the different sides. And just talking about incentives, whatever incentives may come out of this, the idea is to push them more toward 5th Street, to try to keep, I would say, FP&A's idea of massing, as we're proposing it, on 6th Street, but any incentives go closer to 5th Street. So with that, thank you for hearing us, and we look forward to keeping the conversation going. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Scott. Who's next?
Our next caller is Mitch Novick.
Morning, Mitch.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Mitch Novick. I've managed for the last 30 years a multifamily building at 610 Jefferson Avenue, which is across the street from where our new fire station will be built. I agree with all of FP&A's comments. I'm concerned of a change in use, the change in context that may occur at the periphery of my neighborhood. And I would urge you to move forward with caution in terms of taking all the public comment and doing height and relevant studies and massing studies. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, we have one final caller, Wayne Roberts.
Morning, Wayne.
Good morning, Ricky. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. the only concern from this conversation I have is that as far as I recall, and I think it was confirmed in this meeting, that Fifth Street was recently increased in FAR for certain purposes. So it was, I think, 50 feet, and then we made an exception for 75 feet. I don't want to see Sixth Street, which is, you know, approaching a very residential neighborhood and historically, you know, 2 or 3 stories. And we have a tremendous increase in density in the neighborhood. You know, if you look at 500 Alton, Russ's project and his recent addition that will come on 7th, on top of that, the density of this area is getting to be very difficult. And extending that density beyond that 75 feet window at least would be I think detrimental. I certainly want to make residential a focus for Miami Beach. I think it's necessary. We've lost 10,000 residents over the last 10 years, and stopping the proliferation of transient housing or transient uses, whether it be for restaurants, commercial into our neighborhoods, or conversions of STRs of residential buildings. But height is an important aspect of life in Miami Beach. We don't want to be Manhattan. And quite frankly, every city in the United States has FAR requirements, even New York City, which, you know, is insane, but everybody has limits, and we need to understand what our limits should be as a community. Thank you.
Jim, just to correct the record, might have just been a slip of the tongue. We have not increased FAR along Fifth Street, correct? Yeah, because that would require voter approval. The commission does not have the ability to increase FAR. I think maybe he meant height, not FAR. And then we have not lost 10,000 residents in the last 10 years. We've lost 10,000 in the last 40 years, I think since the early 80s. Correct me if I'm wrong. We have not lost 10,000 residents in 10 years.
I don't believe that's over 10 years.
No, I think it's since the early 80s. And most of that happened during the 80s. We've been relatively flat, going up or down, you know, 1 or 2,000 over the last decade. But just to correct the record, because people watch. You know, colleagues, pre this announcement of Baylink, didn't have that strong a feeling about any of this. You know, I think I share sentiments with most of the folks that spoke on this issue of, you know, Sixth Street needs to be a buffer for whatever's happening on Fifth Street. You know, the Flamingo Park is extremely unique and special. We don't want something to overwhelm that neighborhood, and Sixth Street should be that buffer. And a couple comments were made that, you know, I agree with directionally. If we're going to do anything, it should be pushed to Fifth Street. You know, that said, I think with the announcement of Baylink, if the county's serious and has a serious plan, I think it personally incumbent upon us to actually do some real master planning. I would be open to really exploring things like potential FAR increases that would, of course, have to be approved by voters, pushed to Fifth Street, so that, you know, if we're going to do workforce housing, it truly is on Fifth Street with access to Baylink. I think that would be appropriate, and I think that would protect neighborhoods like Flamingo Park. They're afraid of, you know, encroachments and overdevelopment. But, you know, along a busy thoroughfare like Fifth Street, you allow additional massing there with developers that, you know, would, you know, not be having a lot of parking, and, you know, they would have to have, you know, certain other public benefits, but really make Fifth Street the corridor that would use Baylink and push our workforce housing towards that area. Because right now, you know, you've got literally you have a sex shop that just opened there. That should not be there. You know, put a, I don't know, 10-story building there for workforce housing instead of that. You know, you've got buildings that are abandoned right now. Don't know why they can't make a go of it, but try to incentivize development along Fifth Street on the north side for workforce housing. I know there's a couple of office projects going on the south side, which I think is really nice for residents of Miami Beach, particularly those south of Fifth. But I think we should really explore some real master planning. If the county's serious about trying to deliver, I think they're saying 2028, 2029, that's right around the corner. This could be a really catalytic thing for our city.
And I would be more supportive of seeing that greater flexibility on the FAR, subject to voter approval, on Fifth Street as opposed to 6. But Tom, I think you're telling me now that on 6th Street you could go to 75 feet. Is that what I heard you say?
Yeah, I think this bears some clarification. East of Lenox Avenue, the maximum building height in the CPS 2 district, which is between 5th and 6th Street in its entirety, is 50 feet. However, if you propose residential or hotel development, currently it's 75 feet on 6th Street. What we had suggested in our proposal was that the first 2 lots be limited to 50 feet, but then everything past that could continue to go to 75 feet. The Flamingo Park Neighborhood Association suggesting something more restrictive of 28 feet fronting 6th Street.
You say the first 2 lots, you're talking about the first 2 adjacent to the 5th and Alton building?
No, the first 2 lots fronting 6th Street. So on the south side of 6th Street, the first 2 lots that are closest to 6th Street would have that 50-foot limitation.
But right now you're saying if it's residential or hotel, it could be 75.
Correct.
But Flamingo Park is at recommending 28.
Correct.
And I think the 50 sounds like a compromise situation. I would not, it'd be good to see some masking studies, but I think 75 would be quite high. If you're telling me the fire station's going to be 40 or 45 or 50.
Actually, we just confirmed the fire station's 36. I'm sorry, 35.
It's 35 at its highest point. Yeah, see, 75 would be that would be high.
Correct.
Yeah.
And as we mentioned, I think part of our concern with going lower than 50, certainly 28 feet, is that the maximum FAR is 2.0.
Yeah.
And what we don't want to do is get into a situation where we're opening up ourselves to legal or financial exposure because we impose significant height restrictions that don't allow that FAR to be realized. So we thought that 50 feet was a good compromise because it would still allow for some modulation in the new building, whereas the lower you go, the more blocky the building gets.
Yeah. So is it something that you, the administration, could work on making some recommendations on the flexibility on 5th Street versus, I mean, it sounds like 6th Street, maybe you're recommending 50 feet, but 75 feet on, or something else on 5th Street if they're going to do workforce housing or some sort of, is that something you all could make some recommendations on?
I think to the chair's point about the long-term vision for 5th Street, there's some other items that are on this agenda that pertain to transfer of development rights and TODs. One of the areas we actually identified in both of those studies is 5th Street. And we think that with transit-oriented development and potentially transfer of development rights or even an FAR overlay, that there is an opportunity to revision how 5th Street both is developed and how it connects to 6th Street, because we think that it can be a lot more in the future than just new buildings with tons of parking and ground floor retail. We think that with transit coming, there really is an opportunity, and a lot of that area, even though it's part of an historic district, is very raw. There's a lot of buildings that do need to be replaced. So there's actually, we think, particularly on the north side of 5th Street, an enormous amount of opportunity.
And how long would it take you to work on something where you could bring it back? Because with all due respect, Jack, I don't think we're ready to move it out of the committee, because I don't want to move it to planning, because we're not in a place where we can make a recommendation. And I think that's what this committee should do, and then send it to planning for their comment. So I don't want to send it to planning yet. I'm not going to be supportive of that until we decide what it is that we want to recommend. But how long would it take you to come back with some of these incentives and these recommendations?
I think a lot depends upon what you're looking for in terms of visuals and any further fine tuning of the overlay. We could come back to you in March with something, but if you're looking for something that includes massing studies to compare what you can do now at 75 feet to what we're suggesting at 50 feet to what Flamingo Park is proposing at 28 feet, that is probably going to take a little bit longer. And the only thing I would caution is that when you're going as low as 28 feet at a 2.0 FAR, it could end up looking a little blocky. I mean, massing studies inherently do that. So we always put an asterisk next to a massing study saying that this will not be the final product. This will give you an idea of what the height is, but the architecture will look a lot different. It's not going to be every block having these big blocks. It's quite the contrary. As these projects are developed architecturally, they end up looking a lot different. And the more latitude they have to create modulation, the better it will look and fit in with the surrounding area.
Yeah, the diagrams are less important to me personally because I feel like I can visualize what it would be if you make a recommendation on height and trade-offs and this greater flexibility. So that's where I would like to see this go is so we can try to get closer to making a recommendation so then we can send it back to the commission and to planning.
So thank you. Do we know if the county's coming in to brief us on Baylink? I know I got a briefing. I think they've reached out to each of us to give us an update on what their thinking is. But I think we should at least invite them to a upcoming commission meeting if they can talk to us about what the plan looks like, what their commitment is, do they have the funding and all of that? Because I think for our own city planning purposes, if it is going to happen, then I think we need to plan for it. 2028, 2029, I know government takes much longer than they say, but if that were to be the actual delivery date, we got to start planning for that now.
Yeah, I think they're definitely moving forward. I raised some questions at the TPO meeting because I sit on the board. The recommendation's already been made by the TPO. The county administration is now just reacting within the parameters that have already been set. Originally when they made the announcement, they said the RFP was going to go out in 2 weeks, which I think we all knew that wasn't going to happen. And it's my understanding they're working on an RFP right now. But it does seem like they very much want to move forward with that plan. My concern still has been and continues that, we haven't found a way to bring people past Fifth Street, and we're just going to bring them there, and then people are going to have to find alternate modes of transportation, and maybe that's going to be our trolley that we have there and some other things. So,
yeah, I mean, I don't think the public really has had the opportunity to get briefed on like we have, at least like I have. I mean, I happen to really like it. Almost every other plan had a lot of flaws. This one I think actually works, and it's coming over Fifth Street to Washington. Certainly for our residents, particularly those in Flamingo Park neighborhood south of Fifth, and if we do some development on Fifth, can hop on the Metro Mover and not have to change trains or mode of transportation and end up anywhere in Brickell, Government Center. I think there's going to be some serious development happening at the old Miami Herald site eventually, potentially a lot of office and other mixed use development. So becoming a more desirable place for residents to go. So if they do build Baylink more than any other time in the past, I think the ridership from Miami Beach residents will be real. Whether people from Miami want to come and then get dropped off on Washington Avenue and then walk, maybe, but I think Miami Beach residents will really benefit from being able to hop on the Metro Mover and end up at the Performing Arts Center, at the PAM, at the Frost, at a Heat game, or in downtown Brickell. And I think there's an opportunity for us to build some workforce housing along Fifth Street. And a lot of people who work in downtown would, I think, find that desirable. Anyway, that's just my thought.
So Tom, are my colleagues in agreement that we can get the staff to work on this and bring it back? When do you think you'll have it in April or in March? Or I'm talking about these incentives. I don't personally need diagrams because I can visualize. If you come back with what you think are some of the trade-offs.
Yeah, I think we could come back with something like that in March. If it's just some incentives regarding the best way to incentivize. I think what you're talking about, just for clarity purposes, is how you incentivize moving development closer to Fifth Street, and then having more limitations along Sixth Street to be consistent with that scale.
That's
exactly right. Yeah.
Sort of where I'm at.
Okay.
And I'd like you at least to, let's work together so that I know where we're at, so that we don't get to March and then, have a surprise. And then in the meantime, if we're talking, we can talk to Flamingo Park, and then we can start trying to find a compromise situation so that maybe by March we'll be ready to move this along, because it's time.
Yeah, we can bring something like that back to you in March for sure.
I mean, look, if for those of us who've been here long enough, what's happening throughout our community is, our city, our community, larger community is really growing up into a truly cosmopolitan community. If you look at like Coral Gables and what's happening in that area along US 1, all the development that's happening right on US 1. I mean, nobody used to live on US 1. Now you have some amazing developments happening. And why is that? It's because they want to be able to use the Metro Mover to hop on. People don't want to have cars anymore, and they hop on the Metro Mover. They go to their job in downtown. I've been around long enough. Downtown used to suck. I mean, you go to your job and then there's nothing to. There were food deserts, there's nothing to shop for, nothing to eat, no entertainment. All that's changing. I mean, downtown Miami, Brickell, they're vibrant. They're 24-hour cities now, communities. So, you can truly not need a car to do everything you need to do. I mean, you hop on the Metro Mover, you're in downtown, you go to your job. Afterwards, you can go shopping, entertainment, meet friends, go to a park, go to your gym. Like all of that did not exist 20 years ago. Even 10 years ago, it was kind of spotty, but now the density is really making it a true live, work, play community. For folks who don't want to live in Brickell, they can live in Coral Gables at any one of those developments and be in downtown in 20 minutes. It's great. And I think that is going to happen for us in Miami Beach if Baylink is actually built, where we can live here and enjoy all of the great things that our city has to offer. But to go to work, we just hop on Baylink and you're in downtown in 15 minutes. Don't need a car. And that's true workforce opportunity, because if you don't need a car, that's a car payment you're not paying for. That's garage you're not paying for. That's insurance. That's gas you're not paying for. Your disposable income goes way up. And you can do a lot of things with that money, whether it's saving money, investing that money, spending it on your family or other quality of life issues. And that's what things like mass transit do. And that's item number 3, which we'll talk about in a minute. So can we conclude this item?
Well, I think you wanted to come back. So by acclamation, we'll continue it to March 1st, 2023, and the administration will develop incentives to try to move intensity closer to Fifth Street.
And then, at least with me, I want to work with you before that, because I will get here and then.
Sure, we can schedule a separate meeting through Lewis to discuss some options that we come up with.
And then I also want to meet with Flamingo Park. So let's find a time that we can meet so that we don't get to March and then. Still.
Yeah. What?
Oh, sorry, I didn't have it on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry. Okay, so colleagues, items 2, 3, and 6 are mine. They're all related, interrelated. And it's to talk about workforce housing, something I think all of us have talked about, and I think most of us, if not all of us, support. I've said, in this my last year up here, this is going to be my top priority, to try to do something to create workforce housing in our community. A number of years ago, I think dating back to 2011, preceding all of us, prior commissions had made a commitment to bring online something like 16,000 units of workforce housing in, the coming decade or two. That thing was, if you just do math, that was misleading, in total pie in the sky, right? So I think we've got roughly 45,000 housing units in the whole city, give or take, Tom.
If that, I would need to defer to Alba for the exact number. But
It's in that ballpark,
Yeah.
right? So 16,000 units on top of 45,000, like you're not going to increase, 50% in a couple of decades. It's like a farce, right? So, it's politics, right? It's throwing out what people want to hear. Well, we're going to, bring down housing costs and just misleading, right? We should never have said that. We reduced it a couple of years back to like 6,500, which is also very misleading. You see how hard it is to do, a 20 unit project in this city. We're never going to make a dent in workforce housing unless we, actually come up with a plan on how to do it. And, the things that restrict our ability to create workforce housing in this city, as well as communities throughout the country, are things like, exclusionary zoning, down zoning, things that make it cost prohibitive or really difficult to build housing. So a community needs to decide what it's going to be. Either we're going to be inclusive and have housing for all walks of life and all income levels, or we're not. And communities can decide that. But we, as a body, have constantly said we want to see workforce housing. We want to see housing prices be more attainable for working class, for young people, for people who live on fixed incomes. If that statement is true, then we're going to have to try to have mechanisms for allowing that. Land in Miami Beach is very scarce because we're an island. We have extremely onerous zoning laws, especially since 1999 when we downzoned this city. It exacerbated affordability. If you look in the last 20 years, housing here has just gone up with no relief in sight. I think that's a direct result of downzoning. And if we're going to be serious about this, then we need to create the mechanisms for doing that. We have to decide things like some of the things that I'm going to propose that we talk about: the transfer of development rights, which is something we don't have in our toolbox now. Additional FAR specifically for workforce housing, and we can define what that looks like. We can create time horizons where a development has to occur if they're going to take advantage of FAR increases, or they go away. Obviously, all of this has to be approved by voters, but it's my objective to talk about this over the coming months as a land use committee meeting. And if we are so inclined, pass it to the full commission for further vetting and try to get it in front of voters later this year and let voters finally decide whether or not they want to have workforce housing or not, because we don't have the ability to force a developer to build workforce housing. If it doesn't pencil out economically, they're just not going to do it. This is why we continue to see more and more luxury housing being built here, because that's where the money is at. You can't ask somebody to pay a fortune for land, and the cost of labor, insurance, material costs, construction costs have just gone up and continue going up. So they can't build workforce housing at prices that working people can afford. Now, there are things like increase in FAR and density that allow projects to scale to a certain point that brings down the cost of construction to more affordable levels. There are things that we can do to waive fees, parking requirements that'll further reduce attainability. And then the other item, which is item 6, and we were just talking about it, something like Baylink, which is to the extent that we specifically target workforce housing along transportation corridors, that also brings down the cost of housing, or at least affordability of housing if people can forego the cost of owning a car. So sort of items 2, 3, and 6 are all interrelated. Some of these will require voter approval to the extent that we want to allow projects to have additional FAR, specifically tailored for workforce housing, requires voter approval. Transfer development rights to me is also an issue of historic preservation, historic conservation, where if a designated historic property is so designated, we would give them some additional FAR. That's FAR that can be sold, and that economic value creation would then be used to improve the historic building for things like resiliency. That's something we can explore. And then also targeting workforce development around transportation corridors, whether it's housing for the elderly or for our workforce. These are all things that I want to explore. My personal feeling is that cities, really great world-class cities, are for everybody, all economic levels, all backgrounds, all nationalities. It's what makes cities great. It's why we build parks. It's why we have public education. It's why we have public transit, so that it's not the exclusive use of people with higher economic means. I think our city is now under siege with an influx of very, very wealthy people coming, driving up housing costs and making the city less attainable for folks who don't have those economic opportunities. So anyway, enough proselytizing and soapboxing. I just wanted to introduce what 2, 3, and 6 are about.
What's your goal? Do you want to get staff to come up with some recommendations and bring them back to us?
Yeah, so I'm going to turn it over to Tom a little bit just to talk about conceptually what each of those are. Tom and I have been talking about this for a couple of years now, but Tom, would you, or Rogelio, want to talk about what TDRs are and why they might be a good tool for economic development in our city? What places like City of Miami, how they use TDRs to in fact have historic preservation, and how other communities have used them.
Okay.
Could I throw in a question
Please.
so that they can answer it at the same time? When reading through the memo, North Beach Town Center in the past was put forth as a possibility, but the city said it lacked surplus development capacity. And so I would want to hear in your presentation if there's been a change to that.
Okay. Sure. So transfer development rights is a mechanism whereby a sending site that has surplus development rights, FAR in this case, is able to sell that to another location, a receiving site that is designated by the city, and then they can use that to build a larger building than they would have otherwise been allowed to build. Typically, that also goes in hand with some additional height and other types of zoning incentives. As was stated in the City of Miami Beach, any transfer development rights program would require approval by the voters pursuant to Section 103C of the City Code. Typically, a TDR program has a public benefits component tied to it. So in the case of the City of Miami Beach, somebody who's sending, assuming we choose historic districts as the sending sites, would have to have an agreement to retain, preserve, restore, and enhance the resiliency of the building as an example of a potential public benefit. And then the receiving site would also be limited by whatever cap is set in the zoning code for the amount of FAR that they can use, how much additional height they can get, and any other incentives that we want to include on that. For example, something that we've done recently is limits on short-term rentals, that if you take advantage of some incentive, you can't have short-term rentals. So that's something that could also be included. since it is an optional program. Typically, they require, such programs require approval of the Historic Preservation Board to issue a certificate of eligibility, and then that will define the specific terms of the sending site and what they have to do to restore their building, make it more resilient, keep it, promise to keep it in good repair for the foreseeable future. We have considered similar programs in the city of Miami Beach, particularly in the North Beach area, when we were working on the town center code, at creating sending districts in the historic district, the North Shore Historic District, allowing those properties to sell unused FAR to the town center. However, we found that those properties had very little FAR to sell, maybe 5,000 square feet, maybe 1,000 square feet. And such a program would be cumbersome because a property owner seeking to do a larger building would have to deal with multiple property owners in order to get anything that was actually viable. So at that point, the city chose instead to create the historic districts in that area, and then to just have a standard FAR increase within the town center district. We have seen other cities that get around that because a lot of historic buildings, they were maxed out. So the city of Miami, for example, they have a historic district along the MIMO corridor of Biscayne Boulevard between, I think, 54th Street and 78th Street. And so what they did, they have a height limit. Those properties have a height limit of 35 feet. However, they were given significant extra FAR that they cannot use. If it's a contributing building, they get more FAR than a non-contributing building. And so that has allowed them to sell that excess FAR to other developers. I can think of specifically the, what's the name?
Yeah, there was the Alfred Jane.
The Alfred Jane's Hotel, yeah, property.
The Vagabond, yeah.
The Vagabond, yes.
Yeah.
So she was able to sell her excess development rights to a developer in Coconut Grove. I believe the Grand Bay Towers took advantage of her excess development rights. And then she was able to use that money to fund the restoration of that property that was in very, very much disrepair. It was in a very bad state.
I love that classic example because for those of you who remember, many of those motels, I mean, literally, by the hour, they were for prostitution,
Mm-hmm.
drugs, everything. But these were sort of historic buildings of a certain time, but you could not get them to be anything but what they were. The creation of the TDRs created the economic value. She sold that. She kept, she as a requirement, the value that was created got reinvested in that property, took away the blight that was there, and now is a fine upscale restaurant and hotel.
Yeah. So that's basically how they overcame that issue, is by upzoning the historic property to give them more value to then have the ability to sell to other properties where it could be used. In this case, Coconut Grove, but they can be used in downtown Miami and other commercial corridors where the city has seen value in doing that. So as far as our analysis, that's if the city wishes to consider a TDR program, that's something that should be explored, because if you're looking to put something together and you have to buy 500 square feet from here, 200 square feet from here, 1,000 square feet from here, it becomes a very cumbersome program for the city to manage and maintain records of who transferred what. And also for the property owners putting together, these are private agreements, they are buying it from a private property owner. It is very difficult for them to be able to put these deals together because they're dealing with so many different entities. So that's something that should be considered.
And let me interrupt you there. So one thing I'll just preface, we've got, not including today, we've got 2 more land use meetings just like in the next 5 or 6 weeks. So I want to keep these things here. So no urgency, but I do want to get us to do some deep thinking here on this. And if anyone wants to jump on this and sponsor it, I have no pride of authorship. Is a lot of heavy lifting, but I really feel very strongly we got to take this seriously, and hopefully I'm already getting positive feedback from some of the folks in the historic preservation community. So, but you know how this all works. It'll start getting attacked, and people will start making up stuff, and then people lose their nerve, and this thing dies. So TDRs, for example, you don't have to increase FAR in the city. You just say no FAR increase in the city. It is what it is. It's capped, but we're going to transfer them you know, along. So you know, you have FAR in North Beach, they don't need it, but South Beach needs it and it gets moved over there and vice versa, right?
Correct.
And then the quid pro quo will be there's public benefit and the property that is transferring that FAR needs to reinvest it in their property. So this is not a windfall or a gravy train for anybody. This is a very targeted urban planning tool that hopefully addresses multiple policy goals of a city, which is historic preservation and moving FAR to areas where we say, hey, we can use more workforce housing or more elderly housing or what have you. So that's what TDRs in essence can do.
So we would suggest for potential sending areas, if the committee wished to proceed with this, looking at historic districts and particularly those that are in low-lying areas that have significant resiliency concerns, Flamingo Park, Ocean Beach Historic District, Museum Historic District, Collins Waterfront, Normandy Isle, North Shore, and Flamingo Waterway, which are probably the most vulnerable of our historic districts. And then for receiving areas, looking at those that do have the access to transit. So the 5th Street corridor, hopefully will have some sort of a major public transit investment. The Alton Road corridor, which does have express bus services and does have the city trolley services, and the West Avenue corridor as well as part of that. And then the 41st Street corridor, which also FDOT I know is exploring options for transit along that corridor. So
yeah, right. I think everything you just said in terms of all of those areas are the right areas to focus on.
Can I ask a question? So if we were to do the transfer development rights, that would be a referendum to get the program approved, but then you wouldn't have to go to referendum with each transfer. Is that right?
Correct. It would establish the mechanism to allow this to proceed. Yes.
I think we might have to identify the receiving districts.
Correct.
Because
Yeah.
that's where the FAR increase would be. And to Aurelio's point, I think one of the best things about a program like this is that it can be very strategic and the commission can identify those areas that would be the receiving districts. So it's not like you're going to move FAR to any part of the city that you want to. It's going to be in strategically identified areas, and those areas that have been identified as being able to accommodate additional FAR. So it's going to be very narrowly and surgically tailored in that regard. The only other area that I would suggest, in addition to the ones that Aurelio mentioned, is potentially the 17th Street corridor. Due to the fact that that will be a direct connection to the convention center, and that is zone CD3, and there may be an opportunity for some receiving districts along the 17th Street corridor.
So, you know, for example, let's say we wanted to build more housing for the elderly, right? You got to be strategic about that because the elderly are they have needs that are different from, you know, young families that need to be closer to a school. So presumably if you want to build some more elderly housing near mass transit, near you know, a Publix or grocery stores, near health clinics, places where it's walkable and safe, right? So good urban planning, good strategic planning, you know, needs to happen for this to work successfully, but that's, you know, what we're elected to do is to figure this out. But and it really is a purview of city government to do this. You can't just rely on the private sector to do this because there's so many things that interplay here to build an ecosystem so that this works. And if we want to be a city that's a city for everybody, this is the kind of planning we need to be doing.
Yeah, I agree.
Because right now the free market, all it's being built is hotels and luxury housing. That's pretty much all that's going on in our city right now. Okay, so I mean, I think you did a great job on sort of teeing up what TDRs can do. Is there any caller?
When you want to bring?
There's one caller on Zoom, Matthew.
Matthew. Okay, Matthew.
And Matthew, when you start, can you state your name for the record?
Matthew?
Yes, I'm sorry. Hi, good afternoon. Matthew Goltanoff. And I think that, good afternoon, Commissioners. I think that the chair kind of teed us up a little bit, but as you consider perhaps incentives, FAR and or height incentives for workforce housing, I hope that it's also, it also includes more than micro units. So besides the elderly, there's also many young families and people who are in their workforce who are their 20s, 30s, and 40s.
Yes.
And apartments are in short supply in our city. So to whatever extent, as incentives are drafted, they should also focus on increasing that supply, which is very much needed. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks, Matthew. I don't know if you were seeing the earlier parts of the meeting this morning, but we were definitely talking about that.
And we have one more caller, Mark Needle.
Okay. Good morning, Mark, again.
Good morning again. I just wanted to take this idea of transfer of development rights a little bit further because when we did the Alton overlay, we tried to eliminate the bonus, which is essentially not serving a public purpose. It's just there. It just gives you additional FAR if you satisfy a certain mix of use. The bonus, wherever it exists in the city, and there's only a few places left, but it does, should be restricted to only serve the purpose, to only be given if 100% of the bonus is used for affordable and workforce housing in a mix to be determined by the city. So that's some way that you can target and incentivize that what you would like in areas that are already zoned for that FAR capacity. And additionally, I'm going to bring it up to folks at Flamingo, the idea of doing transfer of development rights within the overlay to shift development from 6th to 5th without requiring an FAR increase. Because I think looking at this localized rather than globally is a way of ensuring that you don't, I heard mention of the corridors which go around historic areas like Flamingo Park, and the overlays are carefully crafted to shift the development away from the lower scale in a transition phased way. So I think it really needs to be thought through as a local matter and done in concert with the local neighborhood associations across the city to develop consensus for where it's acceptable and where it's not. That would be the best way to build support for doing such a thing. And I could see, again, for example, doing it within this overlay. We already intended, by the way, to allow smaller properties to be exempted from restrictions as a way of accommodating their FAR. And our phasing was intended for the larger projects. So basically, go do what you're proposing, Commissioner Ariel, I think fits very nicely in this. I can't speak for the group, but I personally can see it fitting within a portfolio of solutions that incentivize the development to shift. And it could be done without actually increasing the FAR, which wouldn't require a vote. Or maybe it would, but it would certainly be an acceptable one because you're just transferring within a specified zone. You're not increasing the actual density of that area. You're increasing the efficiency of using it.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Mark. That's exactly right. You're not necessarily increasing FAR in the whole city. You're just moving it to strategically designated zones to fulfill a public purpose, a public policy, and have the benefit of the donor property realizing an economic benefit that then gets reinvested into that property, whether it's for beautification or for resiliency, and then checking another public policy, which is historic preservation.
Mr. Chairman, our next caller is Wayne Roberts.
All right. Good morning, Wayne.
Good morning, Ricky. I forwarded you the U.S. government census information just to confirm what I was saying, that no, our resident count has not been flat over the last 10 years. It has dropped about 10,000 over the last 12. It wasn't the last decade. It's about 12 years. But it's actually 30,000 since
I stand corrected. I'm going by the stuff that we use to get elected, which is you know, how
No,
many,
this is the
how many
federal
voters, but
government doing a census, so that's the basis that I'm using. So,
all right.
uh, as it respect to 1980 or 2010, our density has increased, yet our population has decreased. And I'm all for affordable middle-class families moving into Miami Beach and micro units are not the answer to that objective because developers make more per square foot on larger units, so that there's no incentive for them. The only incentive for them would be if they were to utilize those properties for STRs and transient use. So whatever benefit we provide developers, I don't care what it is, if it's dollars or space, has to be, the precedent must be that it's used for owner occupied properties and not rentals. It should be condos. It should be for middle class so that we can raise the average person in Miami Beach's net assets, not the developers, and raise the style and quality of life for residents here and now and in the future. And rentals are not the answer. That's just keeping the man down. It's condos where it's affordable. We provide some down payment instead of doing billions of dollars in go bonds for convention centers that sit empty, or I know it kind of proved, there was no competition, but we spent $150 million, and a lot of it went to Bass museums for artwork that's overvalued. Like, private collectors would never pay those prices. So, and no residents even walk into. If you did a analysis, the percentage of residents that visit the Bass Museum.
Okay.
Mr. Roberts, your time is up.
Thanks. Thank you. Okay. Thanks, Wayne. Okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'm seeing one more, Johan Moore.
Okay. Johan, good morning.
Good morning again. I really want to praise Commissioner Adiola's vision on this. And I want to second Mark's comments. I really think there is a great possibility of consensus and some really meaningful forward motion. And if I can riff off of what Wayne said, my immediate reaction was, why no? Of course, the working class needs rental housing. And I would maintain that that is true. But if we can reconceive using somehow public funds or governmental incentives in order to create multi-generational homesteading and multi-generational family wealth by way of condos for working class families, that is an even more brilliant approach if we can pull that off. Thank you again very much, commissioners.
Thank you. Anybody else?
No more comments.
Okay. Colleagues, what I'd say with this item, we'll bring it back. And we'll keep talking about it, but I wanted to tee it up, get it on our radar. I personally, want us to workshop this at least for the next 2 meetings. And if we're so inclined, maybe send something to a full commission for further deliberation. I do think all of these items should be town hall meetings here in chambers as well as throughout the community, because eventually if we're so inclined to put something before voters, they're going to ultimately vote for it. But, this, my last year in office, I've committed to try to do workforce housing. So I'm going to fulfill that promise. So everyone think about this, meet with Rogelio, Tom, do your due diligence. I think there's something worth exploring. And if you guys want to jump on it, sponsor it, take it, no part of authorship.
Thank you.
Okay. We kind of talked about this next one already, but discuss and identify development of transit oriented development zones. And Vice Chair Dominguez, I know that, Mark had a real keen interest in bus rapid transit along 41st Street and the Julia Tuttle. Yeah. And so, we haven't talked about, what we're going to do, if anything, on 41st Street with respect to, things like housing or other development. But I know he was very interested in, improving our mass transit capabilities. So clearly 41st Street is one of those transit oriented development zones. 5th Street now with Baylink back on the table, I think is another. North Beach, yet another. So to the extent that these are transit oriented zones, and these aren't exclusively, others were mentioned, 17th Street, Alton Road. Are these areas where we want to continue to look to fund mass transit and then, associated housing, so that, families can afford to live in Miami Beach? And part of that affordability is not having to have, 2 cars, let alone, any cars, and be able to, jump on mass transit, have local jobs, local schools, and, just have a high quality of life, because it's affordable to live in Miami Beach because you've got everything that you need, from jobs to schools to parks, to not having to, spend money on cars that 99% of the time are sitting, unused in a parking space.
Thank you, Chair, for bringing this forward. We definitely should look at some transit-oriented development in certain areas, but there definitely needs to be community outreach. Just from looking at the agendas, I received emails from West Avenue. They do not want this, or not interested. And so it would be important to set up meetings to meet with the public in the different neighborhoods to see where it makes the most sense. And 41st Street, right now it's a traffic nightmare, and it has been for a very long time. I know that there's a task force on there. I'd have to look into if this was part of their discussion, but I'd like to hear more from the other members here.
Yeah, I maybe I haven't gotten that email. I'm not sure what the West Avenue group is opposed to, because there's actually nothing specific about this other than a concept. But people, everyone complains about traffic. Okay, so why are people in cars? They're going somewhere. They're going to a job. Okay, if the jobs aren't in Miami Beach, they're somewhere else. Well, why aren't those jobs on Miami Beach? You can't complain and not provide solutions. So when people say, well, we don't want these things, but we want you to fix traffic, I think that's sort of it's just talk, whether it's a red herring or whatever it is. But like, people are in their cars for a reason, right? If they're going to work, okay, then why aren't those jobs on Miami Beach? If they're going to their kids' school, why aren't there schools that they can walk to? Anyway, I think you had your hand up.
I too want to explore the options, and it's my understanding it's just a concept, so we're just trying to get ideas and so forth. So did you have an idea when you wanted to bring these items back?
Well, I want to keep 2, 3, and 6 up here to talk about it. When people talk about traffic, okay, we have a crappy mass transit system in Dade County. That has not a lot to do with us. We've always had that situation here. If we get Baylink, if we get viable bus rapid transit, that's going to help. But we also have to explore, why are people even having to move around? If you have a community where, you can truly live, work, and play, you don't have to get in a car so much. But having grocery stores on, not every corner, but in walkable distance, you don't got to get in your car. If you have access to a health clinic or your doctor, you don't have to get in your car. If schools are nearby, if parks are nearby, if all the things, your dry cleaners, all the things that you need in life on a daily basis, if they're within walking distance, or you can hop on a trolley, then you start reducing traffic. It's a lot. Traffic is due to a number of factors. Really bad zoning that it predates us, that goes back to post World War II, to the defunding of mass transit, again post World War II, and becoming a car centric society. Urban planning now is trying to undo the sins of the past. But if our residents want us to deal with traffic, that is going to also require changes in our zoning. We already invest upwards of, I think, $15 million, roughly, give or take, in the trolleys every year. We don't control the Metro Rail. The county seems to want to bring Baylink to us, which is, I think, great. But if we're going to tackle traffic, it's a zoning issue, and it's not just about, people talk about overdevelopment in our city, and Mr. Roberts a minute ago said we lost 10,000 residents. I don't think that's accurate, but if we're losing residents, and what is all that traffic? It's not residents, right? So, people come into hotels typically aren't renting a car, which are extremely expensive, and paying $50 a day to park that car. They're taking an Uber here. So I don't know that it's any of that. So we'll keep this here. Is it? Okay, I'll read that in a minute. Okay. So we'll bring this back.
So just to confirm, items 2 and 3 by acclamation will be continued to February 15th.
Yeah.
Okay.
Item 6, we also explored this, which is discuss housing, workforce housing increase in FAR for workforce housing. So it could be part and parcel with TDRs if we move forward with that, or if we don't do TDRs, do we want to explore allowing additional FAR bonuses for development of workforce housing? And then, do we want to put parameters on something like that where, it's for the next 5 years, 10 years? Do we want to put parameters on where it would be located, and other parameters?
I've got a hard stop at 12:30.
Okay.
I would, if Commissioner Rosen Gonzalez is not here, I would move to defer item 14 and 17 if she's not here.
Is Commissioner Rosen Gonzalez on Zoom or anything?
I don't see Commissioner Rosen Gonzalez on Zoom. No.
Okay, so items 14 and 17 are off.
And I've got a hard stop
roll
at
it
12:30.
12:30.
So
Okay.
I don't know if you've got 3 other items. I don't know if there's one that's more important to you.
Well, 15, I think, can be quick. But item 6, basically, I mean, it's self-explanatory, which is, do we want to explore additional FAR for specific workforce housing? And there's a lot of parameters we can put around that. I mentioned a few of them. We can roll that to the next land use meeting, but again, it's something I think worth exploring. Okay. Item 15, discuss requirements for EV parking in new developments. So, I think everyone's aware, EVs are here and they're growing. I think right now in this country, it's 5% of the new car market. Globally, I was surprised just recently to read it's 10% of the global market already. So it's going up and up and up. The administration this past year in implementing the Inflation Reduction Act has created really large incentives for the expansion of EV charging stations, car credits for purchase of EVs. So, that 5% is going to quickly become 20%. Some states like California are going to ban the sale of internal combustible engines by the year 2030. So, our city, I think, needs to start thinking about upgrading our infrastructure. We already have EV charging stations in many of our public parking garages. Do we want to increase that? And then also for new developments, to what extent do we want to make this a requirement for them? Because, I recently bought an EV, and I will tell you, it's not as convenient as gas stations. If you live in apartments like most people live in Miami Beach, apartment buildings are not equipped with EV charging stations. So this is going to become a big issue for residents moving forward as they convert to EVs. So do we want to get ahead of the ball and start requiring new developments to have a certain number of EV parking stations? And then, in our own city garages, do we want to expand EV parking stations, as well as in our surface parking lots? Do we want to have these things?
Do we know the cost associated with having a a station? Like when we had the ones in our garage, do we know what a station is costing us to install?
In the public garages, I don't have that offhand. I can get that from Monica.
Maybe we can bring it back next. So when I'd asked Nick in my briefing, I'm curious about state law, and we could do that next time if you want. I'm curious because I'm really expecting there's going to be significant changes in state law here that are going to start requiring condos and apartments to allow owners to have stations. So I'm interested in that, and then I'm interested in the cost. I'm very much interested in expanding in our city garages, and I do think it's a good idea for new developments that we start making that a requirement to a certain extent.
And I'm fully supportive of this.
Yeah, I think I could be wrong about this. I don't know what it is in our city garages, but I know a lot of these, because there's a lot of companies now, they're publicly traded companies. They'll pay us for, Monica, they'll pay us to be able to come in and take a space. They'll retrofit it, and then, you know, they make money off this. So I'm not sure that it necessarily costs us anything. Monica, you correct
do
me.
you know
You're the guru. What's the state of the art with EVs? What's happening?
Okay, so Monica Beltran, parking director. Sorry, I'm out of breath. So you asked about how much. Blink, we have a contract with them now, but we're going out for an RFQ. We don't pay them. They share revenue. We give them the spaces, right?
So they pay all the installation fee and everything, and then they
We
just
provide the infrastructure. They install and maintain.
So how much does the infrastructure cost?
Well, it depends on our power grid. It's basically a space, right? Like we have here, but we need to make sure that the electric supports it.
Is that the infrastructure you're talking about? Or are you talking about the actual box that is put there? Or is that?
No, nothing. All the equipment is provided by them.
Oh,
We give them the space with sufficient power to support it.
got it.
So infrastructure, our cost is really the power, providing power to them. And then they pay the power and give us a percentage of gross.
They're paying so they're hooking up, but they're paying the power.
Yes,
And then they give us
a percentage.
percentage.
We're hoping to get the same thing. We're out for an RFQ, which will come before the commission soon, maybe February.
So if it's not costing us anything, there's no downside to expanding the availability, is there?
At all. It's just what we have had to invest in upgrading our grids. But that's for level 2, which takes longer.
If I could just interject a little bit, I think what Monica is saying is that the systems that we have with Blink now, which are the level 1 charging,
Level 2.
Level two.
Yeah.
they're not the super fast
Correct.
chargers. The super fast chargers that we would like to install are requiring 220 power as opposed to 110.
Right, so the level 3 charges in like half an hour.
Yeah.
It's what Tesla has.
Yeah.
And so for Tesla to install theirs over at the Penn Garage, they had to put a volt transformer just for that. So we're working with FPL on a contract where they will come in and provide all the power and everything. They don't pay us. They charge the user, but people do have to pay for parking. But it'll be fast chargers and it'll be a few of the lots. And so, like you said, Commissioner, this EV storm is moving fast, right? I think everybody I know that has gotten a car recently, it's electric. And sounds like a song. So we are also, like, I'll be attending a summit for electric charging so that we stay ahead of the ball game, although it's going to be difficult because it's moving very fast.
Yeah. Part of the reason I'm pushing this, because now I'm living it, and it's fascinating. So you learn a lot. So in our city parking garages, we still get the parking revenue, right? We don't lose out on
Correct.
that, and we're getting a piece of the action. So,
Correct.
So it's good from a monetary perspective for us. But what is going to happen now, because the government just now, January 1, is rolling out an additional $7,500 credit for folks who are buying. So like the uptake's going to be pretty dramatic. And then like most folks here who live in apartments, they're all going to be scrambling.
What we've done is by having them everywhere, for example, you can come to Lincoln Road for dinner or something and just charge while you're eating, even if it does not complete. It's just like filling your tank, 2-3 gallons at a time.
And here in our city garage here, I mean, we could expand more of the level 2, couldn't we? Because we've got employees that are coming and spending 8 hours and they don't need a fast charge.
Right. And it's really good because you'll see on the second floor more and more, there are vehicles parked there. But also we had to install our own just plugs on the 5th floor for our own electric vehicles, which we continue to expand. So we're on it. We're trying to expedite, and there are different options. Everything from solar panels to a container where they store electricity, kinetic electricity. So there are options. It's just moving very fast. And by the way, I got contacted, somebody contacted me, this company that wanted to go into apartment and condominiums and do the same thing that Blink does here, which is really, they will install it and people just pay for the electricity.
Oh,
for charging.
Let's you want to talk about that offline because yeah, that's another thing we can maybe explore, which is to try to, if to the extent that whether it's permitting or anything at accelerated basis, if there's companies out there that want to go and do this for condominiums, to allow them to do that, because this is going to be a huge bottleneck.
It is. And the other thing we need to think about is like, if your car charges in 4 or 5 hours, you should be moving your car and letting somebody else park. So that enforcement hasn't been needed yet. But in hours, people usually don't stay overnight. They're just going there to go somewhere. And it's actually an incentive for people to come to a restaurant or for coffee
100%,
at a place that's near a charger.
Yeah.
We're working on it.
Awesome. Thanks.
Pleasure.
Okay. It's 12:30.
Do you want to keep this item on the agenda, Mr. Chair, or is this something that you wanted to discuss?
Yeah, because, we have an RFQ going out, I want to make sure that there's momentum on that.
And also at the next meeting or whenever we're going to do it, I had asked Nick to talk about state law, and we don't have time today,
Okay.
but if you could do that and also check federal law and give us a
Sure.
briefing on that.
Yeah, one thing I forgot to ask Monica, but maybe she's not the person for it. As part of the Inflation Reduction Act, there's billions and billions of dollars. I know that a lot of it is geared towards government. I don't know about local, but I know state governments to build charging locations. But But to the extent that there's money available for cities, let's explore that and see if we can grab some.
When would you like to bring this back, Mr. Chair?
I mean, I think we just exhausted it for a little while, maybe the March meeting.
Okay, I'll bring it back
When is
March
the
1.
RFP? Are we out now on an RFP or do we know?
I don't want to speak out of turn. I know that we're working on the RFP. I don't know if it's on the street yet.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
well,
March.
let me ask you now, let's push for it to go out in the street. I mean, if you do an inventory in our city garage, I think Monica said 9 of them have it. And let's say that the 17th Street has more, but most have 2 or 3. And I have found them very often not to be working. That's another issue. So, you've got maybe dozens at most of charging stations in the city. You start doing simple math. If the city all of a sudden goes 5%, 10% EVs, most people here live in apartments. These apartments were all built, before the last couple of years. There is no way to charge in our city. And this is becomes a big headache.
And you're seeing, a lot of the FP&L work that's happening throughout our city is to try and keep the grid up to speed with the continued demands. That's not because we're building more. It's because the places we are building are requiring more. Elevators require a lot more electricity than, other, uses in that same space. EV charging stations, there's a number of different things, and FP&L is trying to keep up. We need to stay on the forefront, or else we're gonna, fall further and further behind.
Yeah, I mean, Tesla just cut their retail sales price 20%. And if you throw in the $7,500 you get, I mean, they're giving these cars away, and they're really great cars. So more and more people are going to be buying these. We're going to be losing the gas station on Alton Road in Sunset Harbor very soon. So we're going to have fewer gas stations. We're certainly not building anymore. So people are going to be like, well, I can't get gas in the city of Miami Beach. I'm going to go EV. If all of a sudden you've got 10,000 EVs in this city and no place to charge them, we've got a problem.
I'm anticipating that state law is going to change something that's going to require condos to allow installation of charging stations, because that's going to have to happen.
I think there might be a requirement now that if a condo owner has an electric vehicle and they want to have a charging station in their building, they assume the cost of the upgrade to the power grid, but they can do it. If I'm not mistaken, Eric, do you know?
I'm not.
That's
familiar with
Commissioner.
That's what our
Richardson,
building
that's
was told. I have a
Really?
plug-in
Yeah, we got it.
hybrid and.
Yeah, I'm looking at that. Like in my building, we only have 110 power. That gives you like 1 mile to the hour. So you can't do it. So you have to upgrade the grid into the building, the power into the building.
And Commissioner Richardson is correct that this statute was already amended. So an HOA cannot prohibit a unit owner from installing charging equipment either in a limited common element that the unit owner has access to, or in their designated parking space.
Yeah.
As long as they pay the costs. Yeah.
Yeah. But the issue is, at 110, it's so slow. So you have to increase the power into the property. And so that's an investment, but then FP&L has to play ball as well. So.
Or someone told me recently, you can unplug your dryer.
I unplug my dryer. Yeah.
Oh, really? Does that work? So, all right. Well, it's 12:30. All right. So we'll roll over anything we didn't get to. Okay. Well, all right. Well, thank you. Thank you for being here.
All right, so the only other remaining items, Mr. Chair, were 13 and 16, and we'll defer those to February 15th. Okay.
Have a good one.
All right.